Okay, good morning everybody. We'll just kick off with a karakia this morning. Mate whakarongo, mate kōrero, mate nākau, mate wārua, mate manaki mai, mate manaki atu, ka puawai, te manamatanga, tihei, through listening, through talking, from the heart, from the spirit, through giving and receiving respect, understanding will bloom. This is the essence of life. Thank you. Welcome along everybody and welcome to the meeting this morning. I'll just kick off with the housekeeping standard times. Toilets are just out that door there to your right. Should there be an evacuation for any reason, please exit down the stairwell to the assembly point on Spade Street. An earthquake, drop, cover and hold. And if we just make sure our phones are on silent. And these proceedings are being recorded for the purpose of live video, both live streaming and downloading. So by remaining in this meeting, you are consenting to being filmed or viewing by the public. And I'll just call for apologies. Leave of absence.
29th, 11th,
9th of December.
Does someone have to remove that? Councillor Menzies, Councillor Running. All those in favour, please say aye. Anyone against? Carried. Do we have any conflict of interest for any items on the agenda today?
No.
Councillor Brady?
Yes, I'd like to declare a conflict of interest on the discussion on the toilets in town. So my husband's the owner of Kiwi Country. However, I'm not a director or a shareholder, and nor am I a paid employee. So I don't have any pecuniary interest. I'm very happy to abstain from voting, but I would like to be able to stay in the room. Happy to sit in the public gallery. The other thing, and then the second thing is for disclosure on the airport report. Everybody is aware that I was aware that I was on the working party, but again have no pecuniary interest and nothing to lose or gain as a result of this report. The recommendations in the report were consensus made by the working group, and again I'd like to stay in the room, and I'd also like to fully participate in this discussion and retain the voting rights.
Thank you, Councillor. I don't think we've got any extraordinary urgent items. Takes us to the confirmation of the minutes for our meeting held on the 8th of November on page 6. Is there someone willing to move it? No further discussion on that. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Anyone against? Okay, so it takes us to our public participation. Sorry.
Like the extraordinary. I had that meeting.
last week. Agenda.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, that was just, yeah, so that was both of those meetings, right? Yeah.
Oh, sorry, you just said the other one. So,
Yeah, no, I said the 8th, but yeah, it is actually for both.
the only concern I had on that extraordinary item was I thought the resolutions were going to be released along with the report. So you might still have the resolutions confidential.
Post the meeting, paperwork has been released and everything. All that stuff has been released.
But the resolutions don't show in the minutes.
In the open minutes.
No, I'm just checking if that's correct, because my understanding was that the report following that excluded meeting, the report would be released as well as the resolutions of the meeting. That's how I recorded it.
And just the way the agenda is, it stays from the
Well, the PE minutes are on the hub, and the open ones are on the hub and on the web, but the resolutions, this has put me on the spot, with report and
so they have been
outside of the process.
Okay, so that they don't get contaminated. That's right. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to our public participation, and we've got, I believe, two people here to speak today. And we'll start with Natalie McRae from the West Catlin Preservation Society to speak about the upcoming consent process and concerns that she has. So just give you 5 minutes and you can just come to the end of the table there and chat to us, and we can ask you questions for clarification. Welcome along. Ready when you are.
What did you do for that? Oh, yes.
But I used to go on stream, so we have at least here.
What is this, a mute that Teams?
Your speakers.
You're not on
Your
mute.
speakers on silent.
Oh,
Your microphone's not.
Sorry.
You only need to put them in the meeting room.
Cool, looks like we're good to go now. Welcome along.
Thank you. Just waiting for my slideshow.
Oh, cool.
Awesome. Right. Hi, I'm Natalie McRae and I'm here today representing the West Catlins Preservation Group and our community. We've come here today to raise our concerns about the Slopedown Wind Farm, also known as the Southland Wind Farm. Does that click? Oh, perfect. Yeah. So our petition to stop this proposal has 600 signatures, and the council are one of a limited few who can actually comment on the fast-tracked resource consent application. We won't get a say, despite looking at this every day. This particular wind farm is located in the Catlins boundary, and some of the turbines will be 130 metres higher than the tallest peak there. In an ever-growing population, natural areas are going to become a rare commodity. We believe erecting wind farms down south beside the Catlins Conservation Park is a short-term gain. Great South recently prepared the Destination Strategy document, which has tourism as a key diversification for Southland. However, in their risks and limitations, they failed to outline the effects if the regional energy strategy comes to fruition. Given there were 100 potential wind farm sites noted in that document, why would tourists come to see our outstanding natural beauty ruined by a steel and fiberglass jungle? Another area of tourism that is being actively promoted by SDC is astrotourism, including a special site in the Catlins. How does appreciation for the night sky and the stars align with light pollution from wind farms? We know Slopedown has impeccable dark skies. However, Contact Energy have not committed to what the lights will look like and won't produce photo simulations for us. For those of you who are not aware, the turbines will require greater levels of lighting than any currently in Southland because they're over 150 metres high. We have someone in Kaiwera who was originally in favour of the Kaiwera ones. The lights got flicked on. They really don't like it now. They can't see the southern lights because of 10 turbines. We're going to have a much bigger problem here. This needs investigated further before this district is committed to this project. So, a further huge concern for us is that this is also taking place right beside the iconic Catlins Conservation Forest. Contact Energy and their experts have admitted that they found more species than they were anticipating. If they had talked to us first, we would have been able to say, actually it is abundant with bats, birds, the New Zealand falcon, kiraroo, lizards, but they didn't. And one such issue we have is with the bat surveys. So when we questioned them about what effect the drought would have had last summer, the experts said that there would have been less insects around, thus less food, and so less bats. And we asked, well, why don't you do some more testing and get a full year's worth of data? And Contact Energy aren't interested in that. They just want to put this through. Steve Harding even went as far as saying they will go ahead, and if there is an issue for the bats, that they will decommission the turbines post-construction. Inadequate time periods for ecological data collection and these details not being made public to us aren't comforting. Slopedown Hill has been a guiding landmark for our families and communities for centuries. We believe the Slopedown Hill is an outstanding natural feature. The inland Catlins is currently noted on the district plan as an area not yet assessed for landscape values. We would like to know what the council are doing to ascertain this area's significance and whether the council's landscapes review of natural features will be completed before the consent application is submitted. We have a pivotal moment for our community right now. You have the power to leave a legacy for our children. Are we going to chase decarbonisation at all costs? We will all be dead before these are down. Let's just take a moment to assess whether this particular wind farm on the iconic Slopedown Hill is really the legacy we want to leave for our children.
Thank you for that presentation. Do we have any questions from the floor?
I was recently in another forum with the Forest and Bird Manager for Southland, Chelsea, and I had spoken to her about the same thing that you mentioned, and she said, because we in Southland District so far, at least to the best of my knowledge, we are not privy to information that they have got regarding what mitigation steps have been put in place. And I asked her the same question. I said, how convinced are you that there have been adequate steps put in? And she said, we've been given data from Contact. So it seems Contact is speaking to Forest and Bird, but not even to the council. And I have asked that if they could, Forest and Bird could send data to SDC. And she was going to see if more information could be forwarded to us. But just like you, so far we've literally had no information. And I agree with you. Decarbonization, there has to be a balance here. And driving through this place yesterday, I was here at council too yesterday. I was very struck by what we are going to be putting up there and at what cost.
It's quite concerning, isn't it, if they're going to put their resource consent application in at the end of the month and an entity such as yourselves doesn't have all the information.
I've also questioned other things on this forum, the very fact that how much decarbonization can help us in our climate change goals. We seem to be focusing just on carbon. That is 0.04% of the atmosphere. It seems we've reached a state in this country where we think going after something that is 4 parts out of 10,000 can solve the rest of the climate puzzle. That's simplifying things to a model that possibly is never going to make sense. And yeah, I share your concerns with this, and let me see if I can speak with Forest and Bird further and find out what they have got, because they seem to be convinced that there's mitigation in place. I'll need to see evidence of that.
Thank you. We look forward to hearing from that further.
Are you aware that we actually submitted against the fast tracking process as a council?
So when you say submitted, because I've heard that before, in what forum was that?
That in the application for the fast track, I'm not too sure when that happened, but I know that we objected to the fast tracking process as a council from the importance of having that community engagement piece. So yeah, we weren't in favour of the fast track. Any other questions, Councillor Byers?
Thanks, Natalie. It's a good presentation there. I was wondering, where's this you mentioned 100 potential wind farms. What's that? Does that work?
That was done by Great South Regional Energy Strategy. Yeah. And so we just have big concerns that Great South could do the tourism strategy on one hand, the natural environment, and then lots of wind farms separate. It's like they're looking at them in vacuums and haven't actually worked out that they're going to directly affect one another.
That's right, and that significant natural areas piece of work, it's particularly relevant, I think, for the whole country, but if we're going to spend a whole lot of money protecting significant natural areas across the district, it doesn't really make sense that we have these wind farms going up. I was fortunate enough to go to Japan recently. Beautiful country, but across their mountainsides, they've got all these, they're not wind farms, but they're power lines, pylons, with the lights on top, and it has, I thought, destroyed the landscape over there quite a lot. Thanks, Natalie.
Thank you for that, Natalie. I appreciate you taking the time to come and speak to us. And we'll move to our next speaker, which is Dean Ravage of the West Catlins Preservation Society, talking about our research issues in mental health.
Good morning, my name is Dean Ravage and I'm here also representing the West Catlins Preservation Society, other concerned residents of Southland and Otago, but most of all 4th, 5th and 6th generations of our family who proudly call Wyndham and the views of Slopedown home for over 130 years. Slopedown to us is as meaningful as the Remarkables to Queenstown, Treble Cone to Wanaka and Mount Luxmore to Te Anau. Contact Energy have desires to commission 55 220 metre high turbines on our outstanding natural landscape that our community considers to be our mountain, our maunga. They have completed short and minimalistic studies about the influence of the project on flora and fauna and are very quick to tell you how proud they are about how they will mitigate and prevent any issues. When asked what they're doing to help with the anxiety and mental pressure that the development is creating on local residents, you're met with a blank look and the comment, "We're sorry you feel that way." Contact have made a donation of $1,000 to the Rural Support Trust to help assist with issues created. It's nice to know that we have a value. The residents of the community, minus the immediate adjoining landowners, have been excluded from the consent process due to the now repealed fast-tracking process from the previous government. I feel that the agriculture sector that Southland has been built on and will rely on into the future for prosperity has to go through a more strenuous consent process to milk an extra 10 cows or even plant a paddock of Swedes. The consultation conducted by Contact has been minimal, apart from the tokenistic engagement meetings and a free coffee at the Wyndham to tick the consultation box for the consent process. The people who are affected the most by the development have been the ones that are least considered and listened to. The process, in my opinion, is corrupt and insulting. Our power companies simply trying to capitalise on economic hardship of landowners and councils during the current economic climate. The people of wider Southland are unaware of the size and scale of the proposed Slopedown development. Currently, the ever-expanding Kaiwera wind farm can be seen from Colic Bay, and the red flashing lights at night ensure that we know that they're there 24/7. There is no escaping it. And if Slopedown were to proceed, the visual pollution cannot be ignored day or night. Is this what we want Southland to become? Would this sort of development see the light of day in areas such as Auckland and central Otago, where population density and electrical demand is ironically increasing? I doubt it. These companies are simply exploiting the low population density of Southland. Great South have been strong advocates of wind generation and have a draft strategy guided by an advisory group of iwi, councils, major local industry and the electrical centre to tell people of Southland what we want. The panel seems to be very unrepresentative of the wider Southland, and it is hard not to look past it being very self-serving and benefiting. Great South have also released reports indicating threats to Southland's future being food security, fresh water, flood protection and power generation. These 4 factors suggest to me that hydro would make a more suitable and efficient investment, not to mention the increased recreational activities to be generated. You don't see holiday destinations developing under wind farms. Perhaps some of our fantastic farming valleys now planted in pine trees would have been better suited for small but efficient hydro projects. The use of wind to generate power is nothing short of a tokenistic and virtue signalling exercise for green energy. New Zealand currently produces 0.17% of total world greenhouse gas emissions. We all want to do better, and we will do better, but at what cost? Our area and country, for that matter, is world-renowned for our stunning scenery, untouched landscapes, but we're prepared to destroy all of this for inefficient and unreliable power generation. The Transpower website indicates the wind generation across the country is operating at 25 to 30%. Yesterday it was 23%, and this morning before I left home it was operating 18% efficiency. There was 263 megawatts out of the potential 1,259. Having more turbines does not create more efficiency, it simply spreads the inefficiency over a greater area. Recent stories published by Reuters have headlined Sweden plans new nuclear reactors by 2035 and wind power in moment of reckoning as stocks fall and earnings crumble. Both further proof of the romantic notion of wind power future is false. Along with this, we see images of countries like Australia and Germany taking wind farms down and burying the unrecyclable blades in landfill, where fiberglass fragments will bleed into the environment for centuries. I finished with asking you this: what do you want your legacy to be? One that stands up and protects Southland's outstanding natural landscapes for generations to come, and for Southland to remain a province that we are proud to call home? Or a legacy of folding to the corporates who will simply line their pockets with cash and leave the second the farms are commissioned? All of this comes at the expense of our people, our community and our land. I know what sort of history I want to be on. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. I'll just open the floor up again, just noting that please question for clarification from councillors if there's any. Councillor Byers?
Thank you, Dean. That's very good presentation you've made there. You might even send it around if you.
Yeah, I can do that.
That's very good.
Well, thank you very much for that, Dean, and thanks again, Natalie, as well. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so that takes us to our next item on the agenda, which is the gravel extraction guide, update from Environment Southland. I believe we've got a contingent on Teams here on page 27 of your agenda. So I'll welcome Nicole, Paul and Randall, I believe. Just, you've got the sound.
Hi, can you hear us?
We can now, yep, thanks Nicole.
I know, delighted to be able to finally catch up with the council this morning. And while I tested clear for COVID last night, we thought we were better to be on the safe side and be doing this electronically. So look, I'll hand over to Paul Holst and Randall Beale to lead us into the presentation. Then we're happy to answer questions.
Cool. Kia ora, councillors. Paul Holst, General Manager for Integrated Catchment Management. Probably met most of you. I'll let Randall take us through the presentation. As Nicole said, happy to take questions.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you. We can't hear you there, Randall.
I'm not saying anything, Rob.
Cool.
Morning, councillors. Can you see my screen?
We can, yes.
So we're just going to take you through an update on where we're at with our the gravel issues we've got and what we're dealing with. So we'll start with the gravel extraction. So the gravel extraction is undertaken in Southland primarily to supply roading and construction needs. In some instances, gravel extraction is undertaken to alleviate flooding or erosion problems or threats to infrastructure.
We've just lost your slideshow.
We've just lost your presentation, Randall. You might need to put it into presentation mode as well.
That's it, thank you.
Does that look, does that look any better? You see my screen now?
Yep.
Cool. So the cross-section surveys that we do have, the Lower Reti in particular has a deficit of gravel in it. And this is largely due to the large volumes that were extracted from the Reti River in the late 1960s for the construction of the highways and the Tiwai aluminium smelter. But the current situation and challenges that we're facing in Southland, and this is across Southland, this isn't any particular catchment, so it's quite widespread. We're still required to get site-specific consents for anyone wanting to extract gravel requires that. Those obviously require affected party approvals. Affected parties can request supporting data such as ecology reports or cross-section survey or 2D modelling if they ask for it. The site-specific consents are inefficient and cross-prohibitive, particularly for smaller areas of extraction or smaller, smaller contractors. We need an environmental code of practice that supports getting consents and improving the way we operate. And we have funding challenges, but we'll talk more about that further on. I just want to talk briefly about some weather patterns that we've got in front of us at the moment. So the Intercadal Pacific Oscillation Period is a pattern of weather that sits, it sits outside of climate change, but it has a pattern of 20, 30-year periods. We're entering or we're in a positive phase of the IPO, which is the last time we were in the positive phase was the flood events of the 70s, 80s and 90s. So what we can expect is a cluster of floods during that. So we've been in the negative phase since the late 90s through to probably, 2019 or 2020 probably. And climate change predictions by 2050, they are predicting 10% more rainfall for our region. And that, for a river like the Mataura, that equates to 15% more flow. So we've commissioned Dr. Ian Fuller to help us with or develop a strategic gravel management document. And the objective of that is to outline a series of scientifically led strategic principles and recommendations that should underpin or inform gravel management in Southland's rivers and enable either permitted activity rules or catchment consents to be established. The benefit of doing that is it keeps consenting costs down or eliminates consenting costs, and it allows us to deliver more work across the region. So the executive summary, a key problem that's been identified by our staff is the increasing vegetation that is colonising active channels of hitherto bare gravelly surfaces. This situation likely arises from a period of smaller floods, and we talked about that just through that negative period of the IPO phase in the late 90s through to 2020. And the smaller floods drapes fine sediments across the bar surfaces without mobilising the gravels. This has the effect of both increasing embeddedness of the gravels in these surfaces and providing substrate more suited for vegetation to colonise. Overall result is to reduce the mobility of sediments stored in these vegetated or vegetating bars. Furthermore, once colonised by vegetation, root mats and stems further increase resistance to flows, and that limits the gravel mobilisation to events that are large enough to strip vegetation and fine overburden, which tend to be limited to large flood events in either magnitude and or duration. Meanwhile, unable to entrain and replenish sediments from bars within the active channel, the river may respond by incising its bed and or undercutting banks, which is effectively erosion or creating a deep channel. So the responsibilities, as we see it, asset managers are responsible for managing their assets and infrastructure, including any risks associated with gravel. Any threat to our rating district assets, particularly stop banks, we will deal with. Threats to bridges, roads and other infrastructures is dealt with by those asset managers. So there's going to be no change. Well, I don't see any change in the short term. Gravel extraction is still going to require site-specific consents. In the medium and long term, we need to work on getting permitted activity rules that facilitate those work activities or catchment consents. Just want to talk you through this. This is the Mataura Gravel Island, which you may or may not be familiar with. What you're looking at here is an area of gravel that's been taken out by a contractor, and then they've not wanted the rest of the material that's available, so they've pulled out of that area. And you're seeing the gorse and the dense grass that's locking that gravel in place. And that's about 5 metres high there, so it's going to take a very large flood to even get over the top of that. This was causing erosion on the true right bank of the Mataura River, and it was threatening to undercut infrastructure as roads and properties. We had some community drop-in sessions there August, September last year, and this was probably the number one concern that was raised by the people that come and joined us on those drop-in sessions. The difficulty we had is there's no actual funding to deal with it. So what we needed was a project that allowed us to extract this material and use it to build a new stop bank. And luckily we had one in Gore, the Ontario Street upgrade, which has been built with this material. You can see how high it is in here. There's over 50,000 tonne has been extracted from that site, and this is the photo in July on the left, and the photo on the right is just immediately post the September flood. We hadn't quite finished, unfortunately. We had intended to have a better profile that wouldn't catch the gravel, try and not catch the gravel, but we got beaten by the September flood, and it's dropped another metre or 1.5 metres of fresh gravel onto that island. So without that CapEx project in Gore, removing 50,000 tonne to try and alleviate the risks to the infrastructure is a huge cost to the community. So if we don't have those projects, and it's not wanted by contractors, and I couldn't actually give this stuff away post-September, we would need funding to deal with it, which is obviously comes through our rate system. So we need to talk about the why and explain how we're going to do this. So the why is the existing floodplain channel and capacity is not providing the full benefit of the available capacity, which is leading to overtopping and erosion issues more regularly. Vegetated gravel islands are influencing the river and limiting the transportation of the sediments down the catchment. A long period, 20 plus years of small flood events has exacerbated these effects. An effective gravel management strategy must be predicated on reliable information on the gravel load in Southland's rivers. A quantified gravel budget is needed to understand whether gravel extraction is appropriate, sustainable, or likely to result in damage to the river corridor. So we need to change our work program so we can facilitate this work. The what is we need to work within our current corridors. Gravel management options need to include beach skimming and trials that should assess the viability of this approach to unlocking channels that have become choked with exotic vegetation. So this will be a significant change to our traditional work program. Gravel conveyance may also be improved via regular gravel raking in the river corridor, which may also help manage vegetation growth in the active channel. It should be noted that frequent intervention in gravelly channels reduces channel stability and improves gravel or channel mobility. So the what? Working with these processes of erosion, transport and deposition means the river is doing much of the work itself. So we're having less operational costs once we've got the right beach gravel profiles in place. So that would lower the need of large-scale intervention. Changes in flood magnitude and frequency must be considered. Bigger or more regular floods may help resolve the locked river corridor problem, but larger floods will require more room, and channel expansion is to be expected and must be anticipated. Vegetation removal and control and managing the gravel islands profiles will assist with that work program. So how do we achieve this? The first steps to get a gravel management strategy in place that we work through with the affected parties and stakeholders, get agreement, and it facilitates us to implement the what and getting permitted activity rules or consents. It's simply unfeasible to walk away from the river corridors with the infrastructure and investment and livelihoods that are bound up with the current practice of control. A phased approach is needed, and communities will need time to appreciate and understand the changes in practice. The short to medium term priority is to improve our floodplain channel capacity and hydraulic efficiency of those systems. To help with this, it's not just hard engineering solutions that we're looking at. We've got a 2-year program of work funded from MFE, investigating nature-based flood solutions, and that's going to be primarily focused in the mid to upper catchments. Welcome any questions.
Thank you for that, Randall. I've just got a couple myself, and then I'll open it up to the floor. But just around the timing of the plan coming through, you've said 6 to 18 months that you're going to carry on with the site-specific consents. How far through the strategy are you? Are you sort of, have you still got quite a bit of work to do in developing it?
Yeah, thank you, Rob. We have a draft document. We're working through that with some of the affected stakeholders, affected parties now. The next step is to have a council workshop on it and take it through our internal systems.
So who are the stakeholders that you've identified for that?
We'll be working closely with Fish and Game, iwi, Forest Bird, DOC, who would be the 4 main players that we'd want support on the document with.
So will you be talking with any of the sort of the catchment groups, Thriving Southland, and like our community boards as well in those areas as part of that?
Yep, they'll be critical to that work too, Rob.
I'll open up to the floor for now for any questions. Do we have any? Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Randall and team up there. The site-specific consents, I know they can get tricky if there's kind of more work to be done to satisfy affected parties, but I guess on average, if things go fairly smoothly and the right approach to a proposed solution is accepted by all, what are we generally looking at as a cost of a site-specific consent? Is that answer the question?
It can depend on the actual site and the data, and primarily the costs are driven by the data that's needed to support the consent application. If it's a low impact site and there's not much supporting information needed, $2.5 to $5 grand would be a normal cost. But if it's needed ecology reports or 2D modelling, 20 to 30 grand wouldn't be out of the question.
Cool. Thanks for that. I understand, but from being up in the Ardnusser and northern board areas, there are some live situations right now that will require, if there's going to be solutions, they'll need site-specific consents. Is there an opportunity to work with those stakeholders that you've identified on these test cases, essentially, to help support the long-term work that you're doing?
Yeah, we're happy to support applications. The challenge we have with the funding is that the gravel royalties is what largely funds the work that we do to support gravel management. And if we don't have contractors that want the gravel, there's no royalty. So funding becomes a bottleneck quite quickly in those situations. And I know that northern Southland area is starting to fall into that bracket.
Sorry, one last question from me. You mentioned the changes in practice. Knowing that currently some of the gravel procurement is based on some alternative practices, are there certain practices in the region that just are no longer going to be acceptable and available when it comes to gravel extraction? Is this an enticed way forward, the nature base, or will there still be the ability to get consents for, I guess, more historic practices?
Are you talking about what's referred to as the habitat ponds?
Yes. Yep.
So a very strong preference that is also supported by Dr. Clement Legru, who works for DOC and is helping us with the beach skimming trials, as well as Dr. Ian Fuller, is recommending moving away from habitat ponds. There's a very large number, particularly on the Aparima and the Reti. So what we want to try and achieve is working with the contractors that want the resource is the beach skimming trials, removing the vegetation and leaving the beach profile or the gravel island profile that facilitates the rivers in a slightly higher flow, just to sweep over them and keep them vegetated freely.
Oh, thanks for that.
Thank you. Looks like Nicole, you've got your hand up. Did you want to speak?
Oh yes, just on some of those issues. It would be really good if SDC could work closely with your works program for the next year or two. I mean, if we know where gravel's needed, one of the frustrations to me is seeing that South Roads is sourcing most of their gravel from land, and I guess that comes down to timing and cost. I think we can make a bit more progress if we work together. One of the things that is slowing us down is LiDAR. Mataura is going to be the first cab off the rank with that. So at least we'll have the science then to be able to talk to the other affected parties and say, look, obviously there's a build-up here that we need to be able to remove. But if we had the certainty that the gravel was going to be used, that may give the ability for us or anybody else to be stockpiling. I mean, if it's already out, people are more likely to actually access it than, because at the moment, I was in Te Aneo a couple of weekends ago, and had a bit of a tour around. You can see areas that badly need beach skimming, and the point was made to me that it would take 10 years at the current rate. And then I was taken to another site where South Roads is accessing gravel from land. If the gravel's not available in the site, well, that's fine. And at times they may want to mix just to get the right sort of product for the roads, but I think there's ability to work together a bit closer. I'm pretty excited about the idea of getting some sort of global consent through, and some of you probably know that I'd actually quite like to approach government and have our guys manage the whole reaches, including under the bridges, do it in a timely way. The stop-start business that happens at the moment, I don't think sufficient, and it often causes bridges being undermined because it's not done in a timely fashion.
Yeah, that was going to be one of my next questions, Nicola, was around that timing, because there does seem to be a global consensus around the speed at which all this is moving, and what we can all do to help speed things up, given the sort of the nature of the flooding events that we're getting more and more often, and the damage that's being done, both with the rivers getting into land and affecting our infrastructure and our roads as well. So, I mean, time is of the essence here, and into getting some traction on this. And I know there's quite a strong sentiment out in the community around, I guess, the perceived delays around getting this done. And I think a collaborative approach, it's a very big buzzword at the moment, but are there other users of the gravel as well, other than just council, with even the farmers and other contractors setting up sort of quarry operations and the like that can feed into this process as well?
I'll probably let Randall have a go at that, but again, I think if the stuff's sitting there, people would access it. But Randall,
yeah. Well, we've got two issues currently that we're sort of assisting with, Rob, and one in the upper Ariti, up above Mosman, and that Matera Island example I gave you. There was no demand from the contracting market for that resource. It comes down to distance from the work site, there's costs. We talked about stockpiling it on site. At the moment, contractors are reluctant to incur double handling costs. So it's, it may come to the situation where gravel extraction has to be subsidised, and we just can't rely on commercial returns, perhaps.
It's interesting, it's one of the biggest costs in the gravel when it's being used for the likes of roading is actually the cartage of it. So the closer we can get it to the source, the better, in my opinion. Derek?
Oh, hi there, Derek Chamberlain here. I'm just wondering whether we couldn't get more consents for the whole river. I think a lot of farmers, especially where they're getting flooded, would probably be more than willing to go in and extract the gravel for themselves. Either they stockpile it on their farms. I think the whole consent process is just way too hard for them at the moment. But I think to help your funding costs, a lot of farmers would probably carry out a lot of that work where it's affecting them.
I can completely sympathise. It's hard for us as well.
I just wonder, talking to farmers, I think perhaps they've resigned themselves to the fact it's never going to be available. And I wonder if they were sort of probably made aware that they could stockpile some via contract or whatever on their farm for future use, that they might actually buy into that a wee bit. Because, I mean, you might have dealt with contractors, but that next stage is to the end market. I think they probably aren't aware that there's a possibility.
No, I think that's a good point. And even the Matera Island was an example of us utilising a site that wasn't our consented site. So I think there's some more flexibility there where there's a consent in place, and getting more out, because of that example, you had a contractor only wanted a certain amount of gravel, and so the job wasn't finished. Consent was already in place. I think in the short term, some of those things could be more helpful. But at the moment, because it's a permitted activity for a farmer to go and dig it out of the side of the hill, unless it's available, that's what they're going to continue to do. So we actually need to have more education. It all comes down to cost and ease of doing something. If we can alleviate some of those problems, and get some. I mean, the beach skimming to me is a no-brainer. We know as the water rises, right, if it can spread out, it's going to slow it down. We know that. So there's a whole lot of good ecological reasons to be able to have that overall management. It might be minor work, but the cost is one of those factors. If we can get willing people who are going to take it away, that makes it much more easy.
So I'm just going to, Councillor Greene, in a second, but just a quick question in relation to that. From this being in my opinion, and correct me if I'm wrong, a sort of a core part of the work of regional council, at what point did you stop rating for it? Because you mentioned that you need to rate for it, but it's been kind of a core activity in the realms of the regional council's work. So was it rated for in the past and is not rated for, or do you need to increase the rating? How does that funding usually work?
So the targeted rate schemes that we've got fund maintenance and stop banks, and they fund erosion protection, which is putting rock in to protect erosion as permitted activity currently. Gravel extraction, like I said, has been funded solely by gravel royalties from the commercial market. So there's no general rate or targeted rate that we utilise for taking gravel out of the system.
And then there never has been. Is this the way it's always kind of been since 1989?
I think there's probably been activities in the past where the gravel's been contributing directly to an issue, and we've been able to use that as a resource for the solution. There's a bit of that been going on, but generally speaking, we've just had the biggest flood down there for Rima, so our funds do have to be prioritised for the stop bank maintenance and repairs that we've got on the books at the moment.
Paul, did you want to add something?
Yeah, thanks, Chair and Mayor. I just think it's just reiterating that there's an awful lot of work required to respond to what community expects around gravel. The strategic gravel management plan or policy or strategy. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of investment, but ultimately that will give us the direction and the confidence to have some operational certainty. But in the meantime, if any of the infrastructure owners, whether that be an NZTA or a territorial authority, have got concerns around their own infrastructure, they still need to obtain their own consents. Now we'll work with you and support you, but it's still the responsibility of those infrastructure owners. But as Nicol says, if we can help provide a little bit more certainty around the science and the data that's required to do this, then we'll all be in a better place. So I'd encourage this conversation to continue. And we'll continue to keep you updated around our developments. We're working really hard to get this information in the building and respond in a way. So just wanted to make that point.
Yeah, thanks. I guess the challenge around that, though, is the fact that every single consent that we do is costing around, if it's like $30,000. So that's we've got the same ratepayers, and we kind of we need to make it cheaper and easier. I've got a couple of councillors waiting. Councillor Greene and Councillor Menzies.
Thank you. Your Worship, I just want to make a comment. I think I totally agree that we need some timely solutions around this. I'm just also mindful that we're going to have to, at some point, look at a less siloed approach on this. Now, if I look at, I'm going to specifically talk about the Upakarura, but you look at thousands and thousands of dollars worth of investment through Jobs for Nature, and the planting that's gone on below the bridge there. It's an absolute. If we don't sort things like gravel out in one place, you're actually just washing hundreds of thousands of dollars around the river or down the river, in terms of those types of planting and those projects that have been undertaken. And I know that that UPUC one that was done through the Fiordland Trails Trust won't be the only one, but it floods pretty. That was in a fairly minor flooding situation, was flooded not very long ago. So, I'd just like to make a comment around. It seems ridiculous that we would be washing money away, literally.
Councillor Menzies.
Thank you. It's probably just a follow-up to those comments of Councillor Rainey as well, and being mindful that we've talked about sort of global consents for the last few years, and maybe before that, that's in my time. And I'm just wondering what the specific actions are coming out of our discussion today, particularly when we talk about collaboration and working more closely together, and given the concerns that have been expressed, not only just the last wee while, but over several years. What can we do together, and when can we start doing that?
Well, I'd like to see that we could have everybody sitting down in the new year. Obviously, we need some of this LiDAR data. We need a bit more information from Dr. Puller, but let's see. I think we need to keep some momentum on this. I mean, Fish and Game still push for those ponds, and having looked at the Upuck and some of those other rivers in recent times, you think, well, you can see the benefit of the skimming rather than doing some of those things. So we've actually got to get everybody on board. Doc, I think, can now see the benefit of beach skimming, even putting in some braids to keep predators away from the bird life, etc. So I think the ground is moving, but we need to give the other parties the confidence this isn't just a gung-ho type arrangement. I mean, the gravel management is only part of the whole system that we've got to look at. But I think if we get people in the room, we have those conversations, try and work through the issues. I think there's a fear out there this is going to be for everything. It was never going to be for the major things, but it was to be able to do that in a timely fashion, do these smaller jobs, which is good for the river, prevents the erosion that carries on when you go through a lengthy, costly process.
Thank you, Nick. I don't think any of us will be interested in a gung-ho type approach, so that's good. And and the LiDAR data, we have the data, don't we? Is it the analysis that's the problem?
Yes, it is. I'll probably hand over to Randall there. I think we're getting close on the Matara, so it's likely to be the first cab off the rank.
So it is the analysis, it's not the data. The data is ready to be there to interpret it. Is that my understanding?
There may be a little bit still to be flowing, I think, but we're getting closer. Yeah.
There's two sets of LiDAR data. So there's the PGF LiDAR for the region, but we undertook a bathymetric survey LiDAR project for the Matara from 234 kilometres, including the Waikaia catchment. So we've had data quality issues in certain sections of the river, particularly around the Matara Falls and down at Fort Rose End. So we're still working through that, but we've got large sections of that data available now, and that's the that's the data we need for the likes of Dr. Ian Fuller to help us establishing a gravel budget for that catchment, and then we can start managing it better.
So it sounds like we could look for a meeting in February, early February sometime. Should be good.
Sounds like a plan.
Yep.
I'll have to rely on our guys when we actually can do it, but I'm certainly keen to facilitate a meeting. Yeah.
If we work on that and get something sorted the next fortnight, that would be great.
And I think just a comment from me as well in relation to, like we've talked about the stakeholders, and I mentioned earlier on the community boards and the catchment groups, and I'm not sure where your river liaison committees sort of fit into it, but I think there seems to be a sentiment out there, and I think just an awareness of the stakeholders need to go a lot further than just Fish and Game and those sort of key groups. We've got a whole lot of ratepayers and farmers and everything that interact with the rivers regularly, and I think it's really important that we encapsulate them into the whole process, especially around getting this done, because there's definitely a big interest out there. Councillor Byers?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, gentlemen. In addition to the work that you've talked about, you've touched on ecological issues and nature-based solutions, the birds, etc. I'm wondering if, in relation to this increasing vegetation colonisation and your broad-scale poisoning of the river systems, is there some work being done that's going to lead us away from that sort of type of control, just in light of the work that a lot of people are doing with regards to water quality.
Yeah,
it's certainly something we would love not to be having to do as much spraying, and we've had some trials with stock grazing. There's places where tree planting is a suitable alternative, because at the end of the day, if we're spraying year after year, you're putting nasties into your waterways. We're obliged to keep those river channels open, but we're certainly up to innovative ways of dealing with that fairways, and some of like the Te Anau areas, we've had some poplar trial that's been very successful. But you drive around the place, and there's out of the floodplain, there are areas where we could have plantings. Happy to work with any groups in that. Some of it will be owned by council, some of it will be DOC or LINS, but there are other options. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you for that. And if there's no further,
That's right. One of the comments that got made was just the increased flow and the expected kind of climate change factors to take into account. And I guess acknowledging that we're talking about this two entities together, ES and SDC, all of the catchments flow through Southland District Council TA boundary, but the effects of increased river flow no doubt affect the downstream TAs and their jurisdictions as well. So logically speaking, this is a regional issue. Has there been any work with our neighbouring TAs as far as, speaking of a collaborative approach, we've got the regional working group, climate change working group, looking at mitigation and adaptation pathways, and if this seems to sound like an adaptation pathway with a regional scope on it, does that speak to the opportunity to work more collectively regionally, not just between Southland District Council and ES and other parties on this?
I certainly think that's a good idea. And almost in that climate change space, we've got some of the TAs think it's Environment Southland's responsibility. Well, we're happy to lead it, but we all need to be involved. We know the floods we're going to get again. The flood bank systems won't handle in the future. So we've got to be innovative. Look at places you could spill. Look at ways you can slow water, and there may be even areas where we could actually store water in a high event, taking out sediment. It's all about resilience. But we've seen what's happened in the North Island, and we have to move as quickly as we can to be repaired. I mean, strengthening and raising infrastructure is only part of that, because there's no way we will withstand some of the floods that we'll get in the next couple of decades if we are solely looking at the flood banks around the towns.
So no doubt take some shared resources as well.
Yeah.
Cool. Councillor Chamberlain?
Yeah, Nick, Derek here again. That is my concern really, though, that this thing just becomes a bit of a talk fest, and trying to get everybody to agree on how it's all done, I think is the biggest challenge, and it will come at a cost if we can't get this done. My concern is that it's just going to be a talk fest and nothing will get achieved really.
I'm an optimist. It's taken longer than we'd like, but the other thing we can do is work closer together and actually even talk to the farming community about their gravel needs. If we can get people who are going to take it away, give people more confidence, whether it's us or even SDC having their own consent, or another contractor, if they know there's a demand for it, we'll get the gravel taken out in the right places.
Yeah, it's just how long that's going to take, though. Is it going to be 2, 3, 5 years? I don't know, but something sort of needs to happen reasonably urgently.
I think Randall's time frame, the 18 months, is probably realistic, but there are existing consents there at the moment that people could probably piggyback on a bit. So and I'm hearing the frustration after the last events of gravel build-ups and the sedimentation loss. It's ending up at estuaries. It's a win-win situation if we can solve this.
Councillor Keast?
Thank you, Your Worship. Good morning. I'm hearing that we need to look at rating for gravel extraction. In my mind, this is actually flood protection. Because actually this taking the gravel and improving the system that allows the gravel to keep flowing in the river is actually logical in my point, if I'm understanding this correctly, that it actually protects the flood bank and stops further erosion on where there isn't flood banks. So surely you're already rating for it, you just need to use the money or increase the rate that's there, specifying what it is. It doesn't, yeah, I mean, 18 months would be great if we can get it up and running by then, because if those, the IPO is upon us, well, we need to be in gear for receiving larger flows of water.
Yeah,
the LTPs, oh, sorry, you go, Randall. Yeah.
Sorry, Michael. Yeah, that's a great comment. We've got to transition our work program and the activities or traditional activities that we deliver for that funding. The intent of the new or the transition of the work program is to help the river shift that gravel itself. But in order for us to do that, we actually need consents or permitted activities, because at the moment, you know, like if you look at the Matara, it's 234 kilometres long. We can't go getting site-specific consents all the way up and down it. So we need a larger area where we can operate and deliver that work program. At the same time, we've also got to maintain our current assets, and I'm sure, you know, everyone will tell you there's never enough money to do everything. So we do have to prioritise, and that's, you know, and then we get a flood like September come along and takes out a lot of the damage, and we've got to, you know, committed to repairing those assets first and foremost. So it is going to take time.
Thank you. Councillor Ruddenclaw.
Thanks, Rob. Good morning, Margie Ruddenclaw here. Just wanted to make a comment. Thanks for this morning and the presentation. But we've got an opportunity coming up with the Southern Field Days that the gravel extraction could be hot topic in both their sites. Just thought I'd mention it to you guys, and it's a great way to consult with their farming community.
We'll certainly be there, so up for any conversations.
Yeah, I suppose it's important to, you know, this has been a hot topic for as long as I've been in the regional council, so it goes back many years. So we're happy to continue to have the conversations, happy to continue to tell people what we're doing and what we're intending to do, and bring people along on the journey. So happy to do any and all of that type of engagement.
I appreciate that too, but I'm a bit like Derek. We know we need to see something happen.
Cool. Well, thank you very much to the three of you for coming along. Really appreciate you taking the time to come in and speak to us, and yeah, it's been very informative. So thank you very much once again. And the recommendation there is that we think, which I've just done. So someone like to move that. Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Second by Councillor Byers. All those in favour? Aye. Yeah, that'll be used. So thank you very much, gentlemen. Much appreciated. Okay.
Yeah, so you do Darren.
Cool, so we'll move to item 7.2, which is Southland Indoor Leisure Trust on page 29 of your agenda. The role of chair of the
Good morning. Thank you, Mayor and councillors, for the invitation. Great to be here. Apologies from other trustees and the management board. A couple had hoped to get here this morning to support the presentation, but due to other work commitments, I'm unable to be here. Excellent. So really, I guess it's been a challenging year at the stadium, and we don't need to go into that. It's public knowledge, the stuff that's happened. But really want to acknowledge, first and foremost, Ryan, the acting manager. He's done a phenomenal job, and the stadium's currently up for a medium event venue of the year in New Zealand, and I think that's a real testament to some really innovative, hardworking staff and just want to acknowledge, give that credit. So with change comes opportunity, and I think that sums up where we are at the Trust. Some significant changes in the people that run the Trust and on the management board, and it's given us an opportunity to take stock and look at what we do, how we do it, and where we want to go moving forward. The venue itself, and we've inherited an amazing venue. It's essentially a $100 million asset that's community owned, has zero debt, and has literally hundreds of thousands of people going through it a year. And the feedback we get from those from out of town. In fact, one of our trustees came down 18 months ago, and he just can't believe the quality of the facility we have in Southland compared to where he's come from. So we know it's a great venue. It's made up of the three parts: the stadium itself, the velodrome, and the sports hub, which is obviously the hub for a number of sporting organisations, and it's good to have them all together. The board itself, in our structure, we have the Trust, which oversees funding and ownership of the building, and then we have a management board who oversee the management and running of the stadium itself. Now, we are looking at that relationship and looking at that interaction, and so we've got a bit of a review happening to go, is that the best structure to oversee things, and who does what? And I guess it's building on what's there, but also looking at the best structure to go forward. And so there's some incredibly good people on this board, and I have to say we have a really good variety. I know just sitting on the Trust, everyone brings a different skill set, and everyone's passionate about the venue. And I think the same could be said from the board who manage it. The board have just gone through the process, and we're really delighted with who we've just appointed as the new manager, Joe Hutton. And all the feedback we're getting from people around the community is, well, you've got someone great there. And so she's going to bring a new energy and a new life, and we're really excited about how she will fit in with the existing team and the complementary skills, which is kind of cool. So obviously, the major thing happening at the stadium is community sport. That's what it's there for. We do have some statistics, and it's an interesting one, because we're not sure that our statistics that we're presenting are 100% right. But if you've ever been to the stadium at 4:30 on a Tuesday afternoon with 2,500 kids coming this way and 100 kids going that way, trying to capture that. And that's one of the KPIs we've put in for the new manager, is capturing, how do we capture data better? It may not be 100%, and we acknowledge that we'll never get 100% who comes in, who goes out. I don't know if anybody's ever been there with kids. Sometimes they go in and out multiple times. And so how do we capture exactly how many people are using it? But if you're ever to rock up to the stadium in the afternoon, you will see it's fairly busy. There are downtimes during the day, but there's certainly a lot of people playing sports. Of course, the flip side is that we also have events at the stadium. And over the last year, we've seen 140,000 attend 81 events. Huge range of events, from the community polyfest, schools, through to the more corporate style events. There's a balance, and it's a balance that we have to find as a Trust. So my son plays mini ball at the stadium. He loves it, in there with hundreds of kids every Tuesday afternoon. In fact, they made the semi-finals, and unfortunately they lost yesterday. But a few weeks ago, because we had an event in the stadium, that was cancelled. And so we've got this balance point of community sport versus events. Now, events will make us money and will help us to cover the costs. And so there's a balance. And that's where community funding comes in. The community funding enables us to create more sustainable funding and enable us to keep those community sports happening on a more regular basis. Obviously, if we were cancelling the community sport every second week for an event, which would increase our income, those community sports would be looking for other venues to get there. So it's a real tight balance for us to find the happy medium. We did talk about Sports House also there. So all these sporting organisations work out of the stadium itself, which creates a nice hub for everyone working together. There's obviously meeting rooms, conference rooms. In fact, if anybody wants to tour the stadium after the council meeting, the manager's happy to show us through, and you're welcome to come down and we'll make a time. There's some other activities there. We've recently just purchased some major inflatables, and that's been a huge hit. And it's great because we can use those at downtimes, which is another attractional model when there's no event on. It just brings more people into the venue. As far as the community support, this is our major funders, with the SDC's contribution being 75,000. We're pretty confident with all of those funders to continue. We've just literally this morning signed off the funding applications for the ILT, but we've got a pretty good sense on that. As far as where we spend or where we get our income, you can see that 43% comes in from grants, and the other major one is events and functions, and then there's a number of other ones. Obviously, the more cafe and bar income that comes, the greater the expense on the other side, but just gives a rough idea. There's a second one there, but no. How do we use it? Wages and employment costs are fairly major, and then the next one comes in really around depreciation, repairs, maintenance, and keeping a facility up to date. And as you guys will totally understand, the insurance, our insurance went up close to 100,000 last year, and so you suddenly have this massive jump. Quick, last 3 years income expenditure. It's a little bit hard to kind of take some of this as going forward because we've had COVID, and the effect of COVID has distorted some of our accounts. With less people being able to be in the venue and staff not being able to do that, a lot of staff time was used doing maintenance. That was mostly good. There was a few projects that just needed to be re-looked at because the staff didn't have quite the skills, but overall it saved us a lot of money, and so we used that time when there weren't events to do maintenance. So our figures don't show we've done as much maintenance as we probably have because it's been shown as staff time. And obviously with capital repairs and insurance, you can see a bit of growth there. We've had one of our major capital projects is sanding the velodrome track, and we've wanted to do that 3 years ago. And then, of course, the big COVID hit and we couldn't get people into the country. And we've just managed, so in February that's going to be happening, it's a $230,000 project, but it's been delayed for 3 years because there's actually now only one company in the world who can do it, and they're coming in February. So, and that's why in the next year we have a fairly major jump in our capital expenditure and repairs and maintenance to reflect that it hasn't been done over the last couple of years. As far as our financial position, we're okay. We're not either going, we have abundance, we're looking for new ways to spend money, but we're also comfortable with where we're tracking. Our budgeting is kind of interesting because when we budget, we can't budget for events that we don't know. And so our income and our actuals and our budgets can vary quite a lot. It's one of the challenges we're kind of looking at. How do we anticipate really where we sit better? And that's something moving forward. But so for our funding request to council, we are saying we'd just like the same. We're not asking for an increase. Obviously, inflation adjustment would be great, but we're not coming to council asking for more money. We're simply saying we probably need, sorry, we haven't changed the logo on this presentation. It's my bad. We know we need probably another 100 to 150,000 a year going forward. We've got a 3-year window to get to that point with current reserves. And so we're comfortable we'll get there, and we are looking at some strategies to get there. But we're not asking for councils to do that because we know councils are under a bit of pressure. So looking forward, we're pretty keen to get better tracking of that non-financial we've talked about. We've just developed a 20-year asset management plan of how to look after the stadium, and that's starting to kick in, looking really good. And we're working on this long-term revenue strategy. So really what we're trying to do is achieve another $150,000 of funding from other sources. That's looking really positive. There's a number of funders we haven't tapped into who are really keen to come on board. There's some new corporate opportunities for naming. Can't talk about exactly who they are and what they are, but watch the space. And we have a new manager who comes from a corporate retail background, and so I think that brings some opportunity as well. And there's a pile of feedback, but I think in interest of time, I'll look over that and open up if there's any questions.
Thanks, Darren. It was a very good presentation and lots of good work happening there, so appreciate what you guys do. Any questions? Looks like your presentation was...
I guess you've got no way of assessing what the percentage of SDC people attending the stadium is compared to the total crowd.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be a really hard one to monitor.
Yeah.
I can only look at the when you walk in, probably there reasonably often. And I'm there both as chair of the stadium, but I'm also there as a ratepayer of Southland with my kids. And, every Tuesday afternoon I'm there, and you see multiple schools from around the Southland district there at the same time. And so it would not be uncommon to walk in and see Southlanders. Certainly at events, I suspect that a lot of Southlanders support the events very well. If you turn up to an event, you'll see people from Southland at them. So, but it'd be pretty hard to, unless we microchip everybody, which I wouldn't suggest, to be able to work out who's walking in the door.
Well, I think it reflects the whole of Southland very well, and it's a great facility for everybody.
Councillor Wilson.
Cheers, Darren. Just regarding the events, is there any factors, I guess, outside the trust control and the stadium's control that is preventing success of events? Things like accommodation and things like that are preventing larger events from being able to take place?
I'm not sure I have a full answer. I mean, I know that the amount of accommodation can be an issue, and when there's multiple big events in Invercargill at the same time, that pushes a huge strain on events. But I don't know that it's caused us. I think most of the events that we do have been successful, and so for us it's more that balance of how many events, because that affects the community sport.
Yeah, right.
And probably more critical.
Has there been any, I guess, the couple of regional strategies like the spaces and places strategy that's just had a revision, and then also I guess Great South have a event strategy as well. Is there any kind of, from your perspective, is there any comments on that? Those strategies are in a good place to support the stadium and the trust and your objectives?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, as I say, I think we've probably got enough events, if there's any more. And so for us, probably moving forward, it's more working in that capturing the downtime for other users. But certainly those strategies play into the events that happen, and the staff there are using those strategies to their benefit. And we've certainly seen, corporate events happen at the stadium because of the work that Great South's doing, which is really useful.
Thanks.
Thank you for that, and I'll move from the chair that we thank you and receive your report. Do I have a second to that? Councillor Graney, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Carried. Okay, now we've got a item here for the draft training and public places bylaws, submissions and hearing. Oral submitted, we'll be waiting. So I'll move to that item, which is on page 31 of your agenda. And we've got Jane. Are you going to speak with little Jane, or we're just going to...
No, I've got Mr. Breen here to speak to his submission.
Welcome, Mr. Breen, and sorry to keep you waiting there, but...
No worries at all, Your Worship. Thank you very much. Sorry, I'm a bit scruffy. I just come straight from work. I won't hold you up. I don't need gravel moved, and I don't want any money, so... I'll just give you a quick background. My wife runs Yo's Catering Car Food Van out at Winton. We've been going there about 2.5 years. I just thought I'd take this chance while you are looking at redoing the laws. The council's been awesome to work with. Don't get me wrong, I'm not here to have a big whinge. A lot of the ladies we dealt with when we started out were brilliant because we didn't know what we were doing. So when we started out, there were only 2 food vans. Now there's 6 at different stages out at Winton. And the main law that I want you to look at Our actual trading hours by the law, 30 minutes after sunset. Yeah, at this time of year, that's fine. But in winter, that's not so good. Makes it very difficult if we're sticking by the law. Now, the council have been good. We've had the odd phone call. But yeah, it's just, we just need a wee bit of practicality around it. Sunset, 5 o'clock in winter. All the food vans, we don't do lunches. We're doing evening meals. If you look at the traffic coming out of Invercargill between 5 and 6, most people are just getting home from work then. We don't want to go back to the old days of pie carts. We don't want to be open at midnight or anything. At the moment, like at this time of night, the wife's closed by 8 o'clock, and all the other ones are too. So, yeah, if you could look at it, we're not asking for a whole lot, even an hour or so on that law. It's just because the way it's worded, in summer you could open till 10 o'clock and still be within the laws, but in winter you've got to be closed by 5:30 before we've even opened, really. So that was it. Not a big deal, but
I appreciate you coming in and speaking to it as well, and taking the time to come and speak, and the positive feedback at the start always.
No worries. Like I say, the council really have been awesome to deal with.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Green. Do we have any questions for Councillor Fraser?
Firstly, just commend you on your quality of food. I was almost going to declare a conflict of interest because I support your business and my children love Thai food. So, but I was just wondering around those hours, would you feel that if there was no restricted hours, the foot or the traffic would actually dictate a restriction and would keep it from getting out of hand just because business hours would die and people would be away by 8? And
Yeah,
would that create a flexibility?
Well, that is it with us. There is no point staying open, running everything in a food van for 1 or 2 customers after, it's a big rush we've noticed between 6 and 7. And that's all you're looking for. We can't afford to sit there doing nothing.
I just wonder, would it be practical from your point of view if, say, the 30 minutes after sunset continued for the summer period, but for, say, 3 months of the winter, it was just a set time at, say, 7 o'clock or something? Would that be an answer?
That's all we're looking for, just a wee bit of common sense around it. And, I'm sure, like back when it was put in, there were probably no food vans out there. But they're becoming more and more commonplace.
I think that is the legal hours of darkness or something. 30.
Yeah, like I did talk to someone and they said there were concerns over safety, but grown people have to go out at night regardless. So I don't know. That's entirely feasible.
Thank you. And, thank you for just coming along and submitting today. I understood you said in the summer that most were actually closed up and away by 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
And during the winter hours, would you be thinking that it'd be the same trend to be all away by 8 o'clock?
Definitely.
And could be earlier, given
could be earlier.
Quite cold.
Yeah.
While you're waiting.
Yeah. There's definitely no point staying open longer than that.
I just wondered if there is want to avoid causing confusion between when is winter and when is summer and those finishing hours as well. But you've also talked with the other operators in the area, and they're consistent in terms of what you're telling us today?
Everyone leaves at the same time, yeah.
Thank you.
there's no further questions, which it looks like there's not, I'll thank you very much for taking the time to come.
No worries at all, thank you.
So we've got our motions here, and we've got some written submissions as well. Assuming Jane doesn't want to speak to any of it, I'll give her. She's saying no.
She's gone.
Cool, she's gone. So if there's no further discussion on that, we'll look at the recommendations A through to D that we're receiving all the written submissions, and our one oral submitter. Someone in the that. Councillor Ruddencorn, seconded by Councillor Menzies. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Anyone against? That is carried. Thank you. And now would be a good time to have a break for a cup of tea. Welcome along to already. The Auckland Community Board members. And we'll come back at 11:10.
Too quiet to be hurry.
Yeah, that's right. Yes. Yeah. No, I noticed that.
He has been in touch with us in the past and we've arranged to come to questions. I like that.
No, I think you're right. Builders.
Nice to see you again.
Rhetorical question saying.
Well, I think they miss it. I think they you think you can do what you like. The money's to Fine. The question is your prioritising? It's scrape an idea where you dig holes, you just scrape the thing off.
Not doing something they need to talk to. I actually had the same situation.
That's the question. What do we do? Backing of this stuff.
And I rang on a Thursday and got told they don't. Very regularly. Yeah, well, it might have come from me, I told Rob. So that's.
Oh, here she comes.
It was a recent.
Good lady, hero of the day.
I think I got it. The
Open or something, because I mean that's a new game. To me, well, that was actually because I'm pretty much off in the hotel.
he paid it.
Hungry.
That was
You must be. Are you actually fit there half as much as you're feeding? Are you getting it through your little fingers or something? It's just ridiculous.
Erin Keeble, when she was here, went down and did an assessment of the the other day. The guy down there has built a.
Kelly and Michael as well, so I'll hand over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So the purpose of this report is twofold. It's to receive the review document that was prepared by the Airport Working Group, and also to consider whether or not you wish to consult with the community about funding a portion of the airport operating costs from the district-wide rental rate as part of consultation for the 24-34 LTP and the 2024 revenue and financing policy. By way of background, and following the local government elections in October 2022, the newly appointed Fiordland Community Board requested that Council undertake a review of the airport, and a report was presented to Council on the 17th of May this year, which included a draft terms of reference and allocated a project budget of $30,000. The working group was asked to provide an overview of the challenges currently facing the airport, a recommendation to Council for the future direction of the airport, and it was also requested that the report would be completed in time to go through or be included in the LTP process, which is why we're here today. The review conducted by the working group involved putting together focus groups from all parts of the community, including airport management, airport users, business owners and youth. One-on-one interviews were conducted with Council staff, the Civil Aviation Authority and Emergency Management Southland, and a community drop-in session was also held. In addition, the working group completed a review of the history of the airport to determine how it had reached the position it's in today. And it was specifically decided by the working group not to conduct any surveys as part of this process, as any key changes in the airport operations would need to be consulted as part of the LTP process anyway. The working group have prepared a review document which is attached to this report as Attachment A. The report includes details about the current position of the airport, a SWOT analysis, and recommendations for next steps. The review's recommendations include its support for putting in place an interim solution to allow the airport to establish a more commercial operation, while a medium to long-term plan is developed and a more permanent solution of setting up a council-controlled trading organisation, or CCTO, is investigated. It documents support for Great South to do this work, and this recommendation is dealt with in its own report, which is up next on the agenda. The review's recommendations also include that a district-wide rate be put in place to fund a portion of the airport's operating costs until such time as it's able to become self-funding, which is largely the purpose of this report. Additional recommendations relating to land, property and infrastructure, business and commercial, tourism and marketing have also been suggested by the working group. As part of this process, the Fiordland Community Board have also agreed to repay the balance of the airport loan of $631,797 from the Luxmore Subdivision Reserve. It should also be noted that the recommendation asks Council to consider whether or not it wishes to consult with the community about funding a portion of the airport operating costs from a district-wide rate as part of consultation for our 24-34 LTP and 2024 revenue and financing policy. And you're also being asked to confirm the consultation options for general rate funding of the airport at 30%, 50% and 100% of airport expenditure. The full list of recommendations are detailed on page 140 of the agenda, and I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you, Kelly. Did Diane want to speak to this at all?
No, I didn't know I was going to be at the table for the end. I'm just here in support. Well, I'm here in support, and I've got a lot of words for toilets. So, but we are very much, the community board, very, very much behind this report.
Thank you. And I guess from my point of view, I just want to acknowledge the tremendous amount of work that's gone into that report. It's a very big document that's been done in quite a short time period, and it's been done really well. I think thank you to Sarah for her leadership in that process, and the community board members and the independent parties that were there as well, and our council staff too. I think it's been a really good example of that sort of community-led. We haven't just gone out to a consultant and gone, give us some answers. We've actually run it inside the community, and I think that's been reflected in the consultation process that you've had as well. So I think it's a really good piece of work, and I just want to acknowledge the time and effort that's gone into it. It's been, I know it's taken a lot of hours to get it all done, so thank you very much. Was there any comment you want to make, Sarah, in relation to?
No, thank you, Worship. I would just like to add my thanks to council staff. We did go back to them on multiple occasions to tweak things, to find out more information. The history that you see as part of the Working Party review involved trawling through, as you can imagine, many, many years of information, and we certainly had a massive brain dump of information. The history goes back a long, long way. So what you see there is as a result of hours of actually going through that information. I also want to thank the finance team who helped with pulling together some of the numbers that you see in that report. There was a significant amount of work that actually went into looking at that space. And thanks also to the roading team who, through some trials, we actually had a replacement of people through the process as well. So Kelly came into the project late, and so did Hartley. So I want to acknowledge them as well. We believe it is a really robust piece of work. The discussions that we had as a working party, I think, were very thorough, and what I would say is that when we went into this, we actually had no idea that we would come out with these recommendations that are on the table today. Certainly, in particular, the interim solution was something that evolved, I guess, over a period of time, because there was because the desire is so strong to actually see something done as soon as possible. And that's not only from the community board, but also from many of the users of the airport, our community, and certainly other entities like the Fuel and Business Association. So this is why specifically the interim solution is proposed as you have it before you today. It was definitely acknowledged again through the governance team that the forming of a CCTO does take a more extended period of time, and I think that would have left everybody involved feeling fairly frustrated if that had been the only recommendation that you have in front of you.
I guess as well, noting it's quite an interesting setup, being a local asset, but being a strategic asset for council as well. So it sort of becomes the ham and the sandwich between two different sort of just criteria around how it's run, but noting that the community board's effectively kind of putting their money where their mouth is and paying off that loan and funding this piece of work as well. So, yeah, I think it's a really sound approach. Are there any questions from the floor?
I just noticed in the report the mention of pamphlets that were produced a few years ago but didn't seem to really get distributed. So are they still current in like the content? Is it something that could still be used, or move beyond that, or what?
I haven't seen them personally, but Sarah might be able to
comment on that. Through you, Worship. Yeah, the pamphlets were done by our own comms team, and they were put together again in terms of looking at being a form of marketing tool. It's probably fair to say that the marketing that's actually required of the airport requires more than a leaflet.
Yeah.
And but the original cost of those was all contained in-house, so it's not.
I was more thinking of a strategy about marketing total. Yeah.
I think the marketing strategy for the airport requires way more than what we're looking at with those brochures, and I think they will extend beyond actually the content of that brochure. But if anybody's interested, I'm happy to find some copies and we can send them around.
Councillor Fraser?
Yeah, thank you. Support generally the concept of here, but I've got some questions around the district rate. And I guess I come from the point of this is going to go out for consult, and I'm going to have people come to me and say, why? And I'm not sure I have the answer. Why a farmer in the Winton area will benefit from this. And so that's what I'd like to know more on. Where's the benefit? And I think the trickle down through tourism is an interesting one. And I kind of get it. But also seeing if people are flying into Te Anau, then flying to Stewart Island, currently will drive to Te Anau, then drive to Catlins, and they come through. And so we'll get a spin-off. So perhaps it might be less. So I'm just curious to get a bit more sales into how I can sell that to my ratepayers who will be questioning me.
So in page 21 of attachment A, which is the full report by the working group, so there is information in there from the working group about why a district rate. I'll just scroll down.
I've read that like 5 times and I'm still not sure I have an answer, to tell the truth.
Page 170.
I mean, I looked at that and I looked at it and I don't know if I can go to a farmer or a ratepayer in Winton and answer their question.
And I can imagine the Stewart Islanders raising the matter of a district-wide rate there, but not for wolves, in relation to us.
Councillor Menzies and Councillor Butterwright.
Thank you. Just noting in the report, it probably follows on from Councillor Fraser's comments that paragraph 30, despite the provision to general rates being put in place, none have been actually budgeted over the past 2 years. and council last time did not confirm an amount of general rate. I think it was up to 33%, but now there's a recommendation to go out to long-term plan of 30%, not up to 30%. So just a clarification, we then kind of linked into either 30, was it 30, 60, 90, whatever, or 100? Yes, in terms of that consultation with the public.
So those figures, the 30, 50 and 100 came from the working group, just in terms of different options. But Nicole, can I call on you to help with this bit? Because I know that the 3366 that you can explain.
Yeah. So the revenue and financing policy that's in the back of the attachments, it's the thing that says how we're going to fund activities, and it uses bands to say the portion of funding that's going to come from different sources. So it uses a low band at the moment for the airport, which is up to 33%. So option 1 that's in the report, also the option around 30% fits within the current revenue and financing policy. If the council has a preferred option for 50 or 100%, that doesn't fit within our current revenue and financing policy, and therefore we'd need to be doing some consultation on that change at the same time as we're talking about actually putting some money in the long-term plan against these items.
I was understanding that I was talking about the difference of 30% as opposed to up to 30%.
It doesn't matter. So because for me, well, I mean, it's your discretion. So the revenue and financing policy currently allows anything up to 33% of the airport activity to be funded through the general rate. So for me, that means you can allocate any amount from 0 to 33% within that current policy without any change. It's your discretion about what percentage amounts you want to do within that 0 to 33%. You don't have to do 33. It's completely up to you.
That's fine. It was just what is going to go out in that consultation document.
So I understand that at the moment we've got indicated in the resolutions that it's 30, 50 and 100 as the options. What we're also asking in the resolutions of this report is for council to give a steer on do they have a preferred option that we can signal, and also that we can include in the long-term plan, because we obviously need to put cost estimates in, and we're going to be telling people what people's rates are going to be. So ideally we'd like that to include council's preferred option around any general rate funding that will be allocated to the airport.
And hence my question about setting that today at 30 as opposed to up to 30, because that's the starting point.
Yeah. So yeah, you could definitely, if that's your preference, what we would do from there is that wouldn't require a change to the RNFP, and we would then allocate a general rate portion in the budget for the airport, and so that would be coming through the financials that people see in their predicted rates at 30%.
So just for clarification, Nicole, in relation to that policy and the long-term plan, so if we were to go out in a long-term plan with either 30, 50 or 100, would we have to consult on that policy at the same time? Does that go with the long-term plan consultation, or does that have to become a separate consultation piece?
So they're technically separate things, but we do them at the same time. So we try and build them together so we're not duplicating. But technically the revenue and financing policy bit is about the amount of funding that can come from that source. And so if it is over 33%, that we're proposing to collect, then that's technically a change to that policy. But we would separately, we have to do a separate statement of proposal, but most of our communication would be in the LTP consultation document about that.
Yeah, because just thinking that they're directly correlated, and if you can't approve one without the other, so just that, I guess the time available, I guess we can look at that closer at the time. I'm just trying to
just to clarify, in terms of process, we would make a decision on the revenue and financing policy funding band, and then we would make a decision on the amount of funding to be allocated. Yeah.
And that revenue and financing policy would apply to more than just airport, wouldn't it? That covered other stuff.
So in the funding needs analysis, we separately identify the airport as its own sub-activity. So it would just apply to that sub-activity.
I've got Councillor Boatwright.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have similar concerns like Councillor Fraser and Councillor Spraggan, but I am looking at page 144, points 44 and 45 there on page It says, talk about feedback and the numbers. So do I understand that 9 plus 11, so only 20 people responded? Was that the consultation?
That's the case, Nicole, in terms of the feedback.
And of those 7 respondents who indicated what level of district funding should be provided at for 3% said 15, 43% said 3. And then we are talking of district funding and people in just that area being asked. I would presume, this consultation happened around TNL. I wonder if to be more effective at consultations, we need to be having public meetings rather than this when we're talking of a strategic asset like that. That's one concern. But I would not be able to justify, again, someone in Ohio, nightcaps, social deprivation, level number 10, the worst off in the country, that this is providing some concrete benefit to you. And I would say to some extent, this was anticipated that this is what we are going to be coming out with this report. My other question is, Kelly, how does a CCTO function better or would bring efficiencies? I've read the report though. Why go for that option rather than status quo? What do we think?
Sorry, I don't have enough knowledge to answer that question.
Because we seem to be suggesting that's what's going to work, and I haven't seen details of that.
I think, just to answer your last question, just from my perspective, I think there was a consensus around the status quo isn't working well for the airport in the way that it's running. So looking at putting that sort of commercial acumen over it with specialist kind of airport focus, being that it's a unique kind of asset. So I think that's the kind of drive to have that run as its own sort of entity through.
I could appreciate that, but that will come with its own cost and bureaucracy structures and what that will bring on. And we're already talking of, because Stewart Island is managed, it's for, you have a helipad in case the worst happens or something, and something like that can be brought up. Just how do we spread the benefit that this would be giving to the whole district would be my question. And the second is the number of people who have actually responded. It is not really sufficient enough to be able to draw a conclusion here of which way things lie.
Just through you. Sorry, I was just going to make a comment through you, Your Worship, just in terms of that consultation. So that was done as part of the revenue and financing policy last time around, and we did that separately from the long-term plan. So it didn't have the same level of awareness or input or so that did limit the feedback that we got. People didn't really understand what the context of that policy was. So I think that was a limit in terms of the feedback we got. But like I said, this time around, we're doing them together. So I would imagine that the consultation would generate a wider, broader feedback on it.
I think just before I jump to Sarah, I think looking at, this report today is split into basically two options. You've got the workings of the airport and then the funding of it, which is actually two separate pieces. And I think looking at that working side of it and the proposed solution with having the interim solution to kind of prove it, it might have some costs, but if it's done right, and it translates the airport into an asset that's generating income and not running at a loss anymore, then it becomes an investment in that thing rather than cost. But Sarah, I'll let you come.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I just those two paragraphs. I think it just be really, really clear that that had actually nothing to do with this working party's work. That was a report that was put before council over 2 years ago. So it was really just reflecting that as opposed to any outcome from this. So I just want to make sure that they are people understand that is entirely separate. And just supporting the Mayor's comments on the CCTO, a trading organisation. The Working Party highlighted that right now we have, and as you'd have read in the report, we have the operations side of it, which really looks at compliance, and we have essentially looking after the asset from a roading perspective and a building perspective, which is done under the roading team, and in terms of a commercial business structure, that is not an effective commercial business structure for managing an asset such as this. And in particular, we highlighted things like the disconnect between that. The level of expertise in council is not the strategic management of an airport. and in particular as well, that whole that marketing piece, and having some really sound business KPIs and a really sound strategic management plan for the airport. I just also want to come back to Councillor Fraser's comment, because a couple of people have raised it. I think that in terms of the why, for the working party, the emergency management piece of it was a major part of it. Certainly when Diane went to which community board?
I went to Riverton.
To Riverton, to a community board meeting there. There were people around that table that highlighted the benefits if Invercargill Airport did not exist after a major event, whether it be flooding or earthquake or whatever, that Te Anau would be the only airport that was available. And if you have a look at Appendix J, there's some additional reasons. So Appendix J really highlights the vulnerability that we face from a regional perspective, which is why that was included as an appendix.
Councillor Chamberlain?
Yep, thanks, Rob. Look, I was quite critical of this report right from the start, and that view hasn't changed. I think we've just spent $30,000 on a report that anybody to do with the airport could have pretty much told you for nothing. We're looking at spending another $171,000 to go down a CCTO, whatever it is, and paying back 600 and something odd thousand. You know, the fuel and community are up for $830 odd thousand to help fund the airport. When the one thing that is totally wrong with the airport is the way it is run. I mean, put someone decent in the office there that could run the airport, be open, friendly, be a point of contact for the airport, would make a huge difference to this airport. It doesn't need all this money, reports, high-level thinking. It just needs bloody run properly. And sooner people start realising that and stop doing reports. I mean, this thing was bought back in 2002, and not a damn thing has happened. I mean, get real, people. Just manage the damn thing. Run it properly.
Thanks, Councillor Chamberlain. Councillor Byers?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I share the sentiment that I'm hearing around this table. I'm a bit concerned about this being called an asset. You referred to it as a unique asset, and I would suggest that anything that's expensive and costs so much money for a community every year should really be called a liability. I mean, that community in Fiordland's on the hook for a lot of money. What you're proposing here is that we spend a lot more money. There's no light at the end of the tunnel here. It's just more money disappearing into a big hole. The entire district is already well served by 2 airports. Probably all been out of the airport in Invercargill. I know people have been out myself. And there's a good airport in Queenstown. They're not very far away. So Councillor Graney says that the major reason for this airport in Te Anau existing is emergency management. Well, as Councillor Beaupre suggested, if there's an emergency, there's no guarantee, like big earthquake, who's to say any of the airports are functional? It's helicopters. Like Stewart Island's got a half a tennis court down there and access to the rest of the country with a helicopter. You don't need to spend millions of dollars on an airport.
I just want to reflect on your initial comments, Councillor, around the funding of it and highlighting the fact that it's a local asset and the community board have actually supported funding that from their reserve. So that decision from the community board or recommendation in the case of this meeting today has already been made, and that's, like I said before, the community board actually putting their money where their mouth is and funding a different approach to the airport. And yes, it has been acknowledged as a liability. A lot of people have said that, and the purpose of this approach is to turn it into an asset and looking at running it like a business, to Councillor Chamberlain's comment before as well. So I think, we just need to look at the fact that the community board are actually the current governance model of this, and they've recommended that this comes through.
Yeah, well, look, passing the costs from that community onto the wider district, I don't think is a solution that makes financial sense.
Like I said before, there's two distinct pieces here. One is the review and doing the CCTO, and then the other one is looking at the potential of district funding. So they are kind of two separate kind of pieces. Councillor Graney?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I think it needs to be made really clear that Community Board has supported repaying the loan. At the end of the day, the loan does have to be repaid. And I think that in terms of wanting the airport to be able to move forward, that's where the Community Board saw very much as drawing a line in the sand to actually be able to go, okay, yeah, we will put our money where our mouth is, and we'll actually repay the loan, get that out of the way, so let's then start on a more level playing field. And again, same thing. In Great South, looking at taking on the work for this interim structure, again, Community Board are prepared to put their money where their mouth is. The overall objective being that as soon as you reduce the losses in the airport, the funding that will be required as a shortfall from anybody's rates, whoever they end up being, will actually be way, way less. And if you actually look at the tables in the report, you'll see how much less the funding needs to come from rates if these actions are taken. The other thing to highlight is the increase in income that is predicted for 23-24, which is $24,000, also significantly reduces the rate contribution that's actually needed. And I just want to pick up on the comment around the $30,000. I can tell you, I cannot disclose exactly what was spent at this point because we're in public, but it is nowhere near the $30,000 that was allocated by the CEO when this report came to the table.
I think that just also reflects on the hourly rate of the people that have been working in this, volunteering their time as well. And I think it's been not reflected in that cost at all. I think there's been a lot more benefit gained out of $30,000 with the time and investment of people's time in that process. I just lost my train of thought. I'll go to you. Just want to try and think what it's going to be.
Yeah, sort of lost. Have the Community Board looked at, rather than taking money out of the Luxmore Fund, and this is my point with the whole airport, I mean, there's probably 3 businesses that operate out of the airport now that could well be keen on buying their section. So what is the structure around, rather than taking out the Luxmore Fund, why not approach these businesses and see whether they are keen on buying the section and without having to put that burden on the Fielden community?
Yeah, you can answer that.
Yeah. Thank you, Your Worship. That's where the interim solution will look at all the setup, if you like, in terms of leases or looking at freehold options. It does need to actually look at that piece, and that's part of the piece of work suggested in the interim solution.
I think once you carve out the land and do freehold, you don't get to go back.
You don't get it back.
Well, yeah, I get that, but I mean, you could have quite a buy if they moved out of the building. Financial, there's a potential down the track to buy it back, but it could be just a short-term fix without taking the money out of the Luxmore Community Fund. And my concern with this whole airport thing is that it's probably going to lose money this year, and probably told me to do the Great South do their work. There's another year down the track. This stuff needs to happen now. When this current management plan comes up for renewal next year, whenever it is, something needs to happen right there.
Well, that's part of the process and getting this moving now, and that's why we put the pressure to get this out now. And I remembered what I was going to say, and that was the other side of all this. We keep talking about it as a liability and making a loss, but hoping that this is going to be successful, and we all look at it optimistically. When it's turning a profit, we need to look at where that asset's lying at that stage, because if the district isn't going to fund it, then the profit will lie with the Community Board area as well. So there is that other piece to look at as well. And when the CCTO becomes successful and it turns it into an asset that's generating income, where that actually lies, because we don't want the district suddenly saying then, oh, we want this now because it's making money. So just a point to consider. Councillor Menzies?
Thank you, Bishop. I think it's important for this to go out for consultation and getting the feedback from the whole of the district, because I think to date the report's really concentrated on the field and community, and we haven't got the view of the rest of the community. What will be the difficulty, given you can imagine some of those concerns and from our other communities, and Councillor Balpero has already referred to the Oho Nightcaps community, what the advantages that they would see. Is there a difficulty with K looking at the option of 0%, 30%, 50%, as opposed to presuming it starts at 30?
I was thinking exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
Which, does any staff want to sort of, would that be easy enough to have another band in there at 0, 30, 50 and 100?
With the question, and you jump in, Nicole, by all means, would the question not be maybe initially, do you support a rate, a district rate, yes or no, and then if yes, which percentage? Is that how you do it, Nicole, or would you just go straight to having 4 options?
Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah, we'll just organise it however we need to do it. Yeah, in terms of, yeah, if you weren't, and they could actually suggest a percentage as well, might be an option if there was not a, you know, a band that fit their view.
That would certainly sit with me, well, I think, and we get the feedback from the community about whether they want to agree to a district rate, and then if the community can provide feedback on what they see that might be, which might reflect some of the feedback that's already received, may not be happy with 30, but they may be happy with 15, for example.
Councillor Chaplin?
Yeah, I just want to make the point clear for me that the airport is a great asset, and as the person in this room probably has most to do with it, that is a tremendous asset. It's just so frustrating to see it poorly run.
Thank you,
Which is
Councillor.
the whole purpose of the report.
Yeah, but you know, throwing pointless money at it when the solution is right there in the face, you know, initially, you know, without a dollar being spent.
I don't know if this follows the procedures, but through your worship, I wonder if I could ask Derek to expand on what do you mean when you say poorly run?
It's just not managed, it's not promoted, it's not marketed, it's not, you know, it should be. I think that the airport itself will make the money around hangar space and stuff like that. So that whole side of, you know, if someone wanted to go there and buy a hangar, there's no one to talk to. No one will give you answers. No one will encourage you to build a hangar. And if you go to Alex, there's $1 million hangars up there that have happened in the last 2 or 3 years because they were open for business.
Which is exactly what this process is having a CCTO, which gives you a point of contact.
It's so easy to do, Rob, without spending any money.
So does this report cover any of those options that you're talking
well,
about?
I mean, it's covered. I mean, it's seen as a problem, but I mean, it could happen so quickly without the wasteful spending of money. I mean, get real, people.
Through you, Worship, the current structure has contracts in place through to 2024 for several parties, and as a part of the interim solution, those elements will all end up being looked at, and they will need to be looked at really closely. At the end of the day, there needs to be an entity that comes together to run this airport as a strategic going concern, not in the piecemeal way that it's being done currently.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that, but there's so much that can be done in the interim.
Well, that's starting from December if this all goes through. So I was going to move, sorry, Councillor Wilson, and then I'll move to the recommendation.
Thanks. I hear the frustration as well, but I think the work that's been done is important because there's just been a standstill, and the work that the team's done. And I remember addressing the Tianao community prior to the elections, and I was dumped with the question of what will you do about the Tianao airport, and my first instance was I didn't really know there was an airport in Tianao. So quickly learning it was a community issue, and my response, which the community seemed to appreciate, was I think the community know what's best here. We are now widening out to a district-wide conversation, but that goes across all strategic assets, cycle trails, walls. Like, there's a lot to figure out as far as district rates on those. I've, in my mind, kind of broken this up into that there's the interim fix, which hopefully, as Derek's raised, will get the commercial viability of this asset. Whoever ends up owning it, community, district, whatever construct, get it working, because it's someone's strategic asset anyway. However it ends up working, the longer term CCTO, I think that needs a lot of fine picking, because in the last 12 months we've seen, I'm not 100% sure on the difference between a council organisation, a council controlled organisation, a council controlled trading organisation, but there are very prescribed things which can then also add to unreasonable costs, and we've already seen one of our COs ask for exemption to avoid some of those ongoing auditing costs and things. We've also had frustration with one of our other CCOs as far as the whole statement of intent and letter of expectation, and just that the long process that happens on an annual basis that adds. So as long as mitigating endless kind of bureaucratic function in the ongoing operation of the airport, that's the important part that will need ironing out. The question I had on the rating with that 30, 50, 100 is when it's talking about airport expenditure, what is that referring to? Because if we've got a commercial plan in place in the interim, and then maybe a structure that has a good housing for a strategic asset if it's to be publicly owned essentially. If we're talking about then airport expenditure, there could be a very huge increase in operational expenditure based on the commercial, whatever is going to make the commercial aspects work. We don't have clarity on what expenditure might be, or are we talking about immediate, just business as usual expenditure? That's what I'm a little bit unclear about for resolution F, or the resolution K. Airport expenditure, I'm a little bit unclear on what we might be talking about, 30, 50 or 100.
It's more the deficit rather than expenditure. So it's not you're not funding the expenses of the airport, you're just funding any potential deficit which will come through. And again, if it's a CC, well, not again because it's the first time I'm saying it, but if it's a CCTO, you're going to get, it's going to have KPIs around it. There'll be reporting coming back to council for any kind of, so it's not going to be a surprise. We want it'll be run like a business.
So is there any, I'm just raising it because as a resolution, I'm wondering whether airport expenditure is the right terminology for the sake of this resolution.
Yeah, no, it's a few.
We should, that's a fair point. It's essentially that's whatever the shortfall ends up being. So you have your income and your expenses, rather than airport expenditure. It should probably say probably shortfall might be.
Well, you could actually.
Nicole might be better to pick up that word. Should it be shortfall, Nicole?
I can definitely get what you're talking about. The issue that I've got is the funding. The revenue and financing policy talks about the proportion of operating expenditure that we funded from the mechanism, which is why the resolution is as it is. But we can specify in the consultation that the intention is it's only the shortfall that needs rate funding. But the revenue and financing policy will still refer to the total operating expenditure, which is everything. So I think we just need to clarify in the consultation. We're talking about using rate funding, whether it's the local rate or whether it's the general rate to fund that shortfall.
And I think it's important to my earlier point around if there's a surplus as well, then it will have the same percentage. So if it's 50% for argument's sake, either a deficit or a surplus would have which
my point, I guess, with what Nicole just says, that the word operational still is missing from that resolution. So I'd like to see that K at least, if we're going to talk about those resolutions, tidy up that.
Yeah, so probably I'll just use the terminology that we've got elsewhere that says airport operating costs, which are in the resolutions above.
does that still cover off, like would we be better off actually using the word deficit and surplus as opposed to costs, because it's not actually the costs, it's actually you're funding a shortfall or a, just because I agree with Councillor Wilson's comments around being accurate in what we're actually funding, because if we're saying expenditure then we're actually almost committing to funding expenditure. The semantics are quite important.
So if we just say confirm, I haven't got this right, but I'm working through it. Confirms consultation options for funding the shortfall of Te Anau Airport operating costs, and then something about the options.
Yeah. Funding the shortfall or receiving the surplus.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot that bit. Sorry. And then I think the options. Sorry, I'm just taking over now. The options would be around at either 30, 50, 100, or some or another amount suggested by the submitter.
I think having 0 in there as an option.
Okay.
So having 5 options, 0, 30, 50, 100, or additional proposal.
Or some figure as proposed by the submitter.
Yeah. Councillor Meetings?
Oh, it's just a question around, I think it's fairly clear about what happens if there's a deficit and whether that's a local cost or a district cost will be decided in the future. Where does the surplus go? And how does that impact? I'm optimistic.
Yeah. That would be up to the finance team, I guess. If it
Well, also
became...
potentially up to the CCTO, assuming that that's what's in there, because they may want to reinvest a surplus into the airport, or and that will come probably as part of the whole, what Matt was referring to with the statement of intent and everything as well, where the governance body level still sits either at the Field and Community Board or here, depending on where it lands. But those kind of decisions, conversations would be driven through that.
Important, aren't they? Because if it has a deficit for 4 years running, then it runs into a surplus, and then it gets a deficit for the next 2 years. But the whatever that FT is, make the decision on using the surplus. In the meantime, how does a community consultant about it? Or am I getting too?
I'll just jump in about actually around resolution F. So that's talking about the potential recommendation to set up an interim solution, and then it talks around exploring a more permanent solution, including the potential setting up of a council control organisation. CCTO, sometimes when they're set up, are expected to pay a dividend back to council. Not they don't have to, but the process of setting up a CCTO has to be consulted on in its own right under the Local Government Act. So I just want to clarify with council that passing resolution F does not make a CCTO. Just noting that that's one potential structure that could be operated in the future.
Thank you. That's very sound. Councillor Fraser?
Are we required to have a preferred percentage to go out, or can we leave that open?
So in terms of that, I mean, you can actually put no money in the LTP and you can leave it open, or you could say that you're leaving it as it is with up to 33% for the low funding band with no money allocated in the LTP, but that you will then make those changes depending on the consultation feedback that you get. The one downside of sometimes not picking potentially a budget amount to include is that, as I've mentioned, when we do the LTP consultation, we normally put up a rate search where people can go and look at what they're going to be contributing to rates. If we don't allocate a portion of general rate funding to the airport, then that rate search won't include that amount. Now, the items or the amounts that we're talking in the report, they're actually quite minor, so they're not likely to stand out to a ratepayer if they're collected through a general rate, but it's just something to bear in mind in terms of the information that we're showing in terms of what the likely rates would people would be under council, all of council's proposals. But entirely it's up to you. You don't have to allocate anything. But for the revenue and financing policy, if we're not going to allocate anything, my recommendation is that we would just still show it in the current low band range And if council, and in our consultation, we'd talk about what the impact would be if we moved out of that low band.
If I could just add, we do have some figures here just to give you a bit of an idea. So in terms of the bands that we have, at 33%, you'd be looking at $3 per property, and then a further 26 cents per $100,000 capital value. At 66%, it's $6.08 and 52 cents per $100,000 of capital value, or at 100% funding, it's $9.22 per property and an additional 79 cents per 100,000 of capital value. As Nicole said, it's not significant amounts. Currently, the Fiordland Community Board has just included in the L2P budgets 100% funding themselves, and that's $112.48 per household in the Fiordland Community Board area, just to give you an idea of the money we're talking about.
Sorry, Councillor Byers, I can write down.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to, I'm obviously uncomfortable about this whole idea of the district paying for this, but can you confirm item I confirms general rates continue to be an appropriate funding option? Is that general rates of the Fiordland Community Board?
So just through you, Your Worship, that's relating to the revenue and financing policy which Council adopted in 2021, which already identifies general rates as an appropriate funding source up to 33%. So what we're saying is I get a bit funny when it comes to explaining these things, but technically when Council's making funding decisions, it's got a series of factors it needs to consider under Section 101(3)A, which is all about benefits, it's all about who's creating the cost of the service, etc., etc. And we do that thinking in our revenue and financing policy, and so that's set out, I think it's on page 291 of the agenda for the airport. It's demonstrating all of those things, and then as a result of considering all of that stuff, we decide how we're going to fund it. And that consideration from the last time around was that up to 33% of general rates could be used to fund this activity. So what we're putting in there with that recommendation is just confirming that Council acknowledges the current policy allows that, and that in the absence of a change or a direction, otherwise we would probably be assuming that that part of the policy would stay the same unless Council told us otherwise.
So that's effectively replicating the status quo, what we've got at the moment, isn't it? It's just
absolutely, yep.
So, Mr. Mayor, if this was to pass, what are the costs for the district?
Currently at zero.
So I think it's on page 147, there's a table in the report. And so what that's showing is that at the moment, if you move to that table, there's a current approach. And because while we're saying that we can put up to 33% of general rates to it, we actually haven't allocated any money. So the 112.48 that Kelly was talking about is what the local ratepayers are paying, which is in the right-hand column of that table. And then each of the options that we've been talking about in terms of 30, 50 and 100 are in that table, and that shows that because the general rate is collected on two ways, a uniform annual general charge was a fixed amount, and then an amount based on capital value, they're showing there the shift of what that would mean in terms of what the ratepayers in Te Anau would pay, or in Fiordland would pay in terms of the right-hand column, and then what district ratepayers would be paying, including Fiordland ratepayers, in terms of columns 1 and, sorry, they're 1, 2. Let me explain. For option 1, 30% general rate funding, that means everybody would pay $2.76. If you've got a capital value property at $100,000, you'd pay 24 cents, so you'd be paying around $3. And then Fiordland ratepayers would still be paying $78.73 plus their $3, which would make their total $81. And so you can see there what the impact of those three options are.
That's your question, Councillor?
Okay, no, that's cool. So it comes just to the principle then, where the costs are to fall.
Yeah, so at the moment, if nothing happens today, in our long-term plan process, we can propose anywhere up to 33% district funding for the airport as it stands at the moment. So that's just basically confirming that, and we can put the option in to change that later on in the further resolutions.
Thank you, Worship. I think just in the proposed amendment, it refers to a surplus. I think that might be confusing because we're talking about the shortfall being funded from the district at those four options, but receiving the surplus is not really, it's not an issue. It's not at 0%, you know, in those four.
It would be.
It would be. That's what I was saying before. Like if you've got it half, if you've got 50% district funded, then 50% of the surplus could go to the community board, and 50% could go to the district. As opposed to, or could be different, but I think it's.
Does that question become a little bit more complicated because the community board's actually made significant investment as well, and that needs to be a factor?
So are you suggesting it's best to leave that out? It is quite complicated.
It's quite confusing.
Anne stepped up to the table.
Mr. Chair, what normally happens in those instances when you're starting to general rate across the district is that that would come back into the council's books. So it would be almost a reserve that would be held in the district for that asset, all right? And then the community board would almost step to the side because suddenly you would be functioning it from this chamber.
That's a good point, actually, because it would still be targeted to the airport, so you wouldn't actually use it for anything else, so it would still benefit.
Correct.
Everybody.
If then you'd made the decision to go down the CCTO, then that takes you into a totally different realm, as the Chief Executive noted to you before. I think what you've got to do is look at points H to L, and what Nicole has tried to do is systematically go through the decisions that have to be made as part of the revenue and financing policy, and one of them has to occur for this next one to happen. All right, so if you take each one and you go through it systematically, then if you stop at any point, then the ones below it potentially won't apply. Right, rather than sometimes it gets a bit messy if you just look at them all together. But what we're trying to do is cover off some of the points around the revenue and financing policy now, so that when that comes to you as part of the LTP, this part of the discussion has been held, and we thought it was appropriate to do it now, given the discussion that you're having. In terms of the consultation document, it is always really good though, because in the consultation document you need to quantify the impact. So that's why it's handy to have some sort of percentages sitting in there in terms of it.
And those percentages do make sense, and that sort of.
Yeah, and you can change the percentages. All staff have done is taken that was talked about in the report as a starting point, but as you've done by indicating 0 or a percentage indicated by submitter, you can choose whatever you so wish for those.
So just the question about L then, do we actually need L at all if we approve K with 0 in there? I'm just trying to see where L fits into that.
So that's the consultation document. So K is the consultation options. So that's the consultation document itself, what we'll write in the consultation document. L is the revenue and financing policy.
Okay, and so the long-term plan.
Yeah, so that's actually the policy itself. So if you look at that back section, it talks about those bands and things in there. So we're trying to cover off both points as we're doing it.
So you're suggesting we don't need the 0% in L then?
No, because that's your policy. So I mean that really gets covered off at the up above when you say, so do you wish to contribute any general rates? If you said you don't wish to contribute any general rates, we're out of here. You know, that's where it stops. But what we're doing now is just saying, are those bands still appropriate?
I think, sorry, I should also clarify now on looking at that. You know, I did talk about whether council wanted to include any general rate funding in the actual estimates that we put together for the LTP. So while the policy is okay to have up to 30% low band, I probably shouldn't have wrapped up the long-term plan financial information. So if you wanted to actually allocate some funding in the draft long-term plan, we should probably identify what portion that is, or we should probably identify if it's 0. We should probably make that clear so we're not actually allocating any general rate funding. Does that make sense, Anne?
No.
Yeah. I'm still thinking on my feet, which
That's
isn't
okay.
going very well.
Because I think in terms of, sorry, you going to call?
No, you go. I'll think.
Just in terms of the discussion today, I kind of get the feeling that around this table there's a consensus to go out to get feedback on the amount without suggesting a particular amount. If I've read the room right.
Yeah, perhaps there needs to be the question, do you think there should be any funding? Because if you have 30, 50, 100 and zero might become 1 or 2.
I just wonder if that complicates the process by putting a wise question.
Well, that's what you currently have under your revenue and financing policy. You currently have the ability to contribute part of your general rate up to 30%. But it's a decision that you have to make. And as you got to for some of you around the table the last time, you decided not to. You decided it was still appropriate to have it sitting there, but you decided to make no contribution.
And what did we recommend in the long-term plan consultation for that? Did we put a recommendation in, or did we leave it?
I think you just Nicole, can you remember the exact? Did we? I think we just consulted on the bands, did we?
I think we put in the 33%. So we put in the 33%, the low band. But what we did when we did the consultation is we actually, and you'll see that in the feedback, we asked around 15% or 30%. So there was never anything over the 33% in the consultation that we did.
I think the difference this time round is we've got this report, which we are receiving, and we're needing to acknowledge the work that's involved in that report and put it out to all our ratepayers to consider. And it's given the range of options in there for them to come back. And you know, we've given those kind of options before, and some ratepayers have feedback. So,
and given it's not material, and like we're talking about $4, I don't think it's going to, with those rate estimates, it's not going to throw anything out too much. And Councillor Duffy, then Councillor Wilson.
Oh, I think we're better to go out with specific amounts, and that way we can give the scenarios for what the effect of those are. I'm scared if we leave it too open that we get a whole lot of different answers.
You're saying dollar amounts rather than percentages? Or?
I would think percentage amounts, yeah. With the explained result of what that percentage amount will mean.
Just to step away from the funding for a moment and go back to resolution F, just trying to make sure that we get the resolutions right. And ask Diane and Kelly and Sarah, when it's saying we're accepting the review recommendation to pursue the interim solution and then also explore the CCTO options, the report supports Great South doing that work. Would it be expected that we'd add into that resolution that we're acknowledging that we accept the recommendation, want the follow-up to happen, and want Great South to do that work? Are we taking that?
There's a report.
There's a second paper.
So that's a second step.
It's a separate paper after this one.
There's another paper after this.
With deals.
Oh, okay, right. Okay, thanks.
Councillor Graham?
Yeah, through your worship, the information on page 147 also is the actuals. Again, correct me if I'm wrong, either Anne or Nicole. They actually don't take into account any revenue that we know is going to actually come through the airport. These are the budgeted figures as at now. They are not what we actually already know that we're going to get from talk coming back in, and correct me if I'm wrong, and from repaying the loan, or does the loan repayment go in there? Is the loan repayment projection in there?
I think the loan repayment projection is taken into account,
but
that's
not the
what
revenue.
I don't think the revenue is.
Is that correct? Yeah.
I would, Nicole, you go.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. So the budget, the amount in here is based on the budgets that are in Appendix M, and so they are what went to the community board for the airport for the LTP, which includes any budgeted revenue and the rate, and then assessing how much rates we're going to need as a result of that. And so they were, I think, updated following the board meeting with the loans paid off. to reduce, so that reduced the amount of rates needed because we don't need that to repay that loan anymore. So so I believe that the numbers in here are based on the most up-to-date budget, including any revenue that's been identified in 24-25.
I just wanted to clarify that piece because I wasn't sure with this new table.
The known revenue, like the leases and things like that, but I don't think it is like
I don't think it's got the talk revenue in it.
So it's a conservative number basically.
It's a conservative number in terms of what's here.
I think we're going to put this motion
I'm about
soon.
to do that,
I
yeah.
just wanted to clarify, so K as it stands now with the receiving the surplus in there is not going to disadvantage the Te Anau community, given the input to date and the decisions in the future, you know, in terms of receiving the surplus. We're not making it more complicated than it needs to be.
So this, all K is allowing for you to do is consult with your community over whether you, and provide you with guidance on what general rate funding you may or may not contribute as part of the final LTP. So that's all it's trying to do. I don't know if you need receiving the surplus. And I don't think you need that.
It's not going to disadvantage the Te Anau community.
It's not necessary at this stage because it's about rate funding.
It's the difference in terms of the, yeah.
Just through you wish. Oh, sorry. When you get a minute.
No, you go.
No, I just want to clarify in terms of Resolution L because I think there was some confusion there. I think we probably need to maybe separate that into two parts, which is that we identify the preferred general rate funding option for the revenue and financing policy in terms of the bands, right? So that would be the low, medium or high. And then the second part is to indicate whether the council wishes to allocate any general rate funding towards the airport for the draft LTP that is going to be consulted on. And that would be the actual amount that we would be looking to put into the estimates, and that could be at 0 or it could be at 30% or some other number. So, because that would allow us then to finish the estimates for the airport in terms of how you want to see that flow through in terms of our consultation information. And like I said earlier, it's equally valid to put no rate, general rate funding in against that at the moment, because your consultation information will show you when you do add that in later what that looks like.
Yeah, I'm quite confused with that. Sorry, Nicole.
Nicole, can you flick those words through, please?
I don't have them. I didn't write them down.
I actually get where Nicole's going with this because you actually need to deal with the revenue and finance policy completely separately in terms of the banding. And that if that's a resolution on its own, then that's nothing to do with the risk. Well, it is to do with the reports contained in it, but it's actually nothing to do with the airport discussion that we've been having. That's a discussion around revenue and financing. So you're keeping that resolution completely separate to then applying any change in the revenue and financing policy to the airport to allow the 50 and 100 to be there.
So we need to get that into a sentence.
So through you, Mr. Chair, be there too, I think. And Al, is what Nicole said, I think.
Do we want to just take a quick adjournment for Fiona to catch up? And we could probably almost adjourn for lunch. And then we can get this finalised up. Just conscious of our two board members, are you okay for time if we have lunch? It's not going to hold your day up? Okay. Thank you. So yeah, we'll adjourn now for lunch and we'll come back at 10 to 1. And we'll have
That's not your toilet.
So A through to H, as they stand on your agenda, there's I and J, I believe, and we have a K and no L. Is it correct? So I'll just go to everyone. Give everyone a couple of seconds to digest. behind me, and then I'll ask if anyone's in a position to move. Someone in a position to move? Councillor Menzies. Do we have a second to Councillor Graney? All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody against? No. So Councillors Chamberlain, Boparai and Byers. And by majority, that motion's been carried. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for the discussion on that. It was a very robust one. Okay, so we'll now move on to item 7.5, which is related to so the Te Anau Airport Manapōuri review. We're all seeing the next steps that we're just doing.
Thank you. So the purpose of this report is to address the recommendation from the Southland Community Board that the Chief Executive, on behalf of Council, enters into a commercial arrangement to pursue an interim solution to allow the airport to establish a more commercial operation while developing a medium to long-term plan, including exploring the more permanent solution of setting up a CCTO. The report also recommends a terms of reference for a governance group to oversee the work. And Council is being asked to consider whether or not it wishes to appoint Great South to do this work. If you do, then you're also being asked to confirm that this is significantly inconsistent with Council's procurement policy. Again, if you decide to enter into a commercial agreement with Great South, then you are asked to resolve the reasons why you are acting contrary to Council's procurement policy and buyer's guide, and these are covered off in Resolution F on page 304. Finally, depending on which option you choose, there are also resolutions to approve unbudgeted expenditure of up to $171,060 plus GST to be funded from the Luxmore Subdivision Reserve, and also to appoint a governance group to oversee the work of Great South. And Diane from the Southland Community Board would just like to add a few points as well.
Yes. I was quite quiet during the last discussion because I didn't actually realise I was allowed to speak. But they told me I can. Look, this airport in Fiordland has so much potential. I think you all came out there to a meeting and went there and saw it for the first time for some of you last year. And people were talking very positively about it. So I can take you back to that space when you were there and you were really impressed by it. I think, they'll get corrected if I'm wrong, I think other than the loan repayments, it's making less than $100,000 ops cost deficit each year. That's despite many, many years of a confounding, risk-averse, slow and unknowledgeable management. So it's managed to do that and only lose $100,000 a year. Imagine what it's going to be able to do if it's run well. If it's run by an entity that knows something about running an airport. Look, I'm surprised that you weren't, during your district rate discussion, more excited about having district rates and what payback you could get from when this airport makes you a lot of money. I know that there is at least one member on our board and other members of our community that didn't want that offer to go to council or around the district because they quite like, after all the money and heartache we've poured into our airport over the years, for the money to all come back to us when this is successful, and it will be. Just Councillor Chamberlain, I hear what you're saying about employing an individual to run it. But this individual would be a council employee, no doubt, because there's no other way to do it. They would have the same governance model that we do now. So this amazing person that we've hired, that's probably going to cost the $170,000 a year that we're going to give to Great South, is going to have a fantastic idea. I don't know what it is because I can't run an airport, which is why we're here. But they're going to have this great idea, and they will then have to take that great idea to council staff, who will have to write a report and wait for the next available slot at a community board meeting, because we're still governance. And they're going to come to the community board with their idea, and we're going to go after an argy-bargy, yeah, that's a good idea, we should do that. And then the council's going to go, but you don't have delegation, so we're going to have to take it to this crowd here, who are going to do what you've done today and argy-bargy and nitpick and go into little, no offence, because I argy-bargy and nitpick at my own meetings, and do what you do. You're going to do that, and eventually it might be a yes or it might be a no, depending on that, but that is no way to run a business. That is no way to run a business. This must be with an entity with their terms of reference or memorandum of understanding or whatever it is that makes it work, who are empowered to manage and provide proper governance in order to make timely and educated decisions on our airport. And that is why we support the report in front of you, and we support the interim management by Great South. We know them, we've talked to them, and I trust they'll do a good job. So that's it.
Cool. Thank you, Diane. Is there anything further you want to add? I'll open up the floor for questions. Councillor Wilson, were you putting your hand up? Were you looking?
Why not? Thanks, Diane. Please speak before. Always welcome. One of the things you mentioned was, I guess, the question I have is there a potential community sentiment within the Fiordland area that there may be some that don't want to see the district funding in and then the surplus being districtly shared?
Just in terms of the question, Councillor, I just would need to look at the report in front of us. It's probably related to the previous.
Yeah, true. No, thanks for it.
Later.
It doesn't apply.
Councillor Byers, did you?
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Diane. Well spoken. I think from my perspective, I prefer to see get a lot of feedback from the community about the level of rates, and the old lady sitting with the blanket on her knee with the heaters off because she can't afford the power. And I think the Yarnell community, unless something happens during this long-term plan, is on the hook for another $2 million by the time they fix the runway.
Sorry, Councillor, again, just if we have a look at the report in front of us, we're not talking about
question,
funding,
that's right,
so,
question.
Yeah. Have you got a question in relation to
Yes,
this,
I do.
this particular
I do.
report?
What experience has Great South got in running airports?
I think Councillor Graney's probably got more information about their qualifications and things like that than I do.
You want to answer that, Councillor? You can speak if you want, or I can.
Okay, yeah, I can. I'll start with that. So the reason that we looked at Great South was because of the current chair of Great South has airport experience. The other reason that we looked at Great South was because they have an appropriate entity, and from an entity perspective, they were really the only known entity that we currently have relationships with, and that Fiordland has a good relationship, that we need to be able to do that work. The other thing that's really important to note in this is that the steering committee, which is referred to in this report, we will look at bringing an independent chair in with airport experience. So we will add another layer of airport experience into this, as well as being able to use their commercial and business acumen at Great South, particularly think about the marketing arm of it. They've got experience in that area and relationships to other organisations as well. So in terms of ongoing funding, even their relationships in asset.
We're just adding in there that they're RTO for Fiordland as well, so it ties in that kind of marketing and that understanding that they've already got around some of the strategic planning that they've been doing. Kind of flexible.
Yeah, just further to that, I'm just wondering what experience. Well, then you've highlighted the chair. What experience has she had?
Chair is
She's a man.
I thought you said the chairman, Great South. What experience she's got in running?
It's not. You're referring to the wrong person.
Oh, okay. So he's run airports.
He has significant airport experience, and we are looking. Where do we go with this? Commercially sensitive.
Yeah, I think we're just a bit careful getting into individual names and everything here, but I think if you look at it from a high level, for the amount of money that we're paying and what we're going to be getting, we're getting bang for buck for if you went out and to pay an entity to run an airport, noting all the different arms and requirements in doing that. You look at the cost of $171,000, I think we're getting a pretty good deal, and all that experience in there. We've got existing relationships with, I mean, they're effectively CCO of our council as well, so we've got everything all in place and that trusted expertise. So I'm certainly confident myself in this group.
And through you, Your Worship, from that CCO perspective, this project would be ring-fenced, so that relationship is 100% with Southland District Council and not through any of the other entities that Great South look after. I think that's actually really important as well to reiterate.
And again, just noting that governance group as well, that provides that layer of oversight. I think that's an important step in there. And Councillor Graney mentioned it before around having KPIs and everything around this. So it is going to be a measured accountability or accountable process with its own governance group. The CEO.
No, I'll go later.
Okay. Councillor Michael.
Just a couple of my comments about Great South on this one. Now, I know there will be further talk about how this, if we go along with this, it is against our procurement policy. But when this group was formed, I had expressed my concern at that time about the membership, who were on the committee and exactly how distance and how the conflicts of interest were going to be managed. Those continue here. We've got Great South as part of the discussions, part of this report, and now it's going to be getting a certain outcome and certain projects out of that one. I also am worried. Are we putting the cart before the horse here? If at this time we've got an airport that's not well run, listening to some of the things not being open at right time, hangars and so on, that seems to be operational stuff. And we are talking about a way forward before that entity is back on track. And here, when I'm looking at it, Great South has already put into the notes stuff like changing the airport name, considering linkages with low carbon walking and cycling. And I can just see this one taking on a whole life of its own and going well beyond the remit of what we wanted at this point, a strategic asset that is well run. So that is my concern with this.
I think the terms of reference around that governance group would protect all of that. And yeah, I don't see any issues myself around that, but I'll let the Chief Executive.
Oh, look, it was just, thank you. I guess it's just focusing on what the decision here is. Council has resolved to put in an interim arrangement. We just did that in the last report. The working group has identified basically moving directly to working with Great South on that interim basis, and this report is basically saying to Council, you have normally got a different process, but in this case, given the working group's knowledge and experience and having done all this work, you want to go direct. And if I would just like to echo Diane's observations around the council processes that we normally have to go through, which make everything super slow and difficult. What you have in front of you is a choice as a council to say, okay, we're prepared to bypass those other things because this working group, community focus as it is, has seen a reasonably achievable target to go through. If council does resolve this, then we'll put it in place as soon as we can. If we don't resolve it, then we'll have to go and do a much slower process.
So I think just adding to that as well, noting that this has been, I guess, endorsed by the Auckland Community Board as well as the working group, and they are funding that themselves as well. So that's the recommendation that's come through.
Thank you. Mr Mayor, that was exactly my point, is that the Fiordland Community Board resolved to fund it.
Oh, I was just going to say I've got huge confidence in Great South's ability to take on this role. They're business focused, they're motivated, and they're already existing tourist RDO. I think it just lines up so well.
The airport's not going to get moved to Christchurch, is it?
Is that a rhetorical question, Councillor?
I'm not sure.
Councillor Wilson?
I'll follow up on what Paul was saying. I it seems like a really good house for this step forward to go to, but to, I guess, follow up on Brett's comment, acknowledging that there was a Great South member in the review steering group should maybe be highlighted in this decision today, that we acknowledge that there was. Not saying there's a conflict of interest, but there was that line of Great South involvement for the report that then supports Great South to do the next step. So I think that from a transparency point of view should be acknowledged.
Just noting that as part of approving this.
I'm kind of a stickler for the resolutions today, I guess. That's all.
Any further? Councillor Green?
Through you, Worship, if it helps, the discussions that were held with Great South around this solution did not include that particular member of the working party.
Yeah, that is helpful. Yeah, and just for a bit of assurance for the table as well, I have a chat with our independent chair of Finance and Insurance Committee around this as well, and just make sure that he was comfortable with this process too. So we've got the resolutions in front of us, A through to H.
I've just added in the terms of reference from in the report. If you bear with me one moment, please.
So that will come under H. So resolves the point of project governance group to oversee the work of Great South with the following terms of reference. Is that clear?
Yeah.
And yeah, so D, we've got to either agree or disagree. So
just the project governance group.
So that's going to come up there shortly, so you'll be able to see. It's written.
It's in the report.
That is with so while Fiona's putting, I've just got that up. So there's your membership there, Councillor Byers, on the screen now.
So the independent chair was
no, that's not the chair.
okay, right. Who's the independent chair?
That hasn't been confirmed.
Has not been confirmed at this point. It's not the chair of Great South.
Right, that's so. Just we'll start on D while Fiona's typing those out. So, based on reading the room, we're agreeing with the appointment of Great South to do this work. So we can cross out disagrees. Everyone comfortable with that? Yeah, disagrees. And then if we were adding into F, do we want to just put in there noting that Great South stepped out of the decision-making process for recommendation with it?
It'd be better to say stepped out of the discussion, or was not involved.
Did not take part
in the discussion
around the appointment of Great South.
Around the appointment of Great South, because it was done directly with others.
Yeah. Cool.
So F, where's it?
So
a new bullet point.
Yeah, new bullet point in there. Noting that the Great South member of the steering group
was not party to discussions on this arrangement.
And then we've got G there, approving the unbudgeted expenditure to finance this work of up to $171,000 to be funded from the Luxmore subdivision reserve. And H, appointing that project governance group as listed there.
And H, Your Worship, if that becomes district funded, I wonder if the makeup of the board, that governance group needs to
This
change.
is an interim,
It's an interim
12 process. So if it becomes district fund, this is only for a 12-month period. So there'll be a different outcome depending on what happens with that. So we have someone in a position to move. Councillor Greenie, seconded by Councillor Fraser. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Anybody against? Councillor Baker, aye. By majority, that's carried. Thank you. Thanks once again to the team. Thank you, Diane. Okay, staying on the theme of TRL, we'll just go back to
Reduce the level of passion.
page 31 of the
Are you not quite passionate about toilets?
which is on 133 of you. TRL lines part pay for toilet.
Never leaves you passionate. See, I've seen the posts and comments.
Okay, welcome, Carolyn, and welcome. Thank you. I'll hand over there. Who's going to talk to the first of the...
Thank you, Your Worship. I get to talk about Te Anau again. The purpose of this report is to provide Council a review of the current position for customers having to pay for the use of the toilet at Lions Park. This particular toilet was built in 2010 and a contract entered into for the operation of the toilet, and that was awarded prior to its opening. The toilet was installed to cater for a large number of people coming off the tourist buses going through the River Sound. The operation of the toilet at this time was delegated to the local community board, and they agreed to a charging regime for the public toilet. The Lions Park toilet is the only pay toilet in Southland. The paper has two recommendations. One is to agree to approve the removal of the fees for using the toilet. The other is to approve to continue to charge a fee for the use of the shower facilities. Happy to take any questions.
Does the board want to add any?
If I may.
Yes.
So Community Board member Marilyn and Hunter and I have come to Council today to support a recommendation to remove the $1 fee from the Te Anau pay toilets. I know that an email I sent to Mark Day a number of months ago is attached to the report in front of you, but I'm also aware how much reading and information you have to take in, and it's been a very big meeting. So I wanted to be here in person to reiterate some of the key messages from myself and the board regarding concerns about the pay toilet. Most of the visitors to Te Anau are from other countries, and in recent times they are less and less likely to carry cash. Overseas tourists can't do cash out at shops, as cash out is an invalid transaction on overseas cards. In order to get cash, they have to locate and walk to an ATM. The nearest one is over 200 metres from the pay toilets. Then they have to find a business willing to give them change so that they can walk all the way back to the toilet and hand over their $1 coin. There are other council toilets in Te Anau Township that are free, a good 12-minute return walk from the lakefront, and they only have 2 pans. So you can imagine a whole busload of people queuing there. And they're incredibly busy during what we call bus o'clock. There are already long queues for them from the buses that stop up at that end of town, so it's not really an option for lakefront bus departees who are short on $1. I spoke with the owners of surrounding businesses, Lakefront Cafe, Miles Pies, and the 2 souvenir shops at the lakefront about the Te Anau pay toilets. All 4 businesses have similar issues with what some of them describe as scores of lakefront bus tourists coming in waves and asking to use their toilets, asking for cash out, asking for change, asking where the nearest free toilet is. And at this point, they generally all direct up the road to Kiwi Country's Hollyford Cafe, who have a large private toilet facility in the centre of town, which supports their town centre bus hub, cafe and shop. My business is a service station at the lake end of town, and we also encounter multiple requests from tourists for use of our 1-staff toilet. Requests for change and help finding this magical free toilet when we can't accommodate their needs. One of my staff has even created a nice little map, and we have that on our counter in pride of place, showing where all the toilets are around town, so that we have a really efficient process for guiding all the tourists who come and go and provide all this business interruption to our business looking for a free toilet after they've been to the $1 one and can't go there. The pay toilets are only open from 9:30 till 12:30 and 3 till 5:30. It's 5.5 hours a day. Any buses travelling outside this time who stop at the lakefront have to ask their whole bus to use the 2 pans that are unlocked outside the main blocks operating hours. And this leads to queues, frustration and incredulity that there is a big flash state-of-the-art toilet block right there in front of them. They can see it, but they can't use it. The showers are only available from 9:30 till 12 and 3 till 5. That's 4 hours a day. And tourists, of course, want a shower before they go tramping or on their bus and after they come back, which is when the toilets are closed and the showers aren't available. So they're only really available when nobody wants them. Another more unpleasant consequence of people not being able to or not wanting to pay for the toilet is they come up with their own creative solutions to relieve themselves. And I see it when I'm walking my little dog around the beautiful council parks in Te Anau. Clambering out of bushes in Lions Park and climbing out of the stand of trees in Anzac Park, and ironically grown men peeing on the back of your pay toilets. There have been times when I've had to clean up much worse than that in the private space that they find between the gap in our diesel tank and the mini golf hedge. I'm tired of doing that. There's also the locals, not happy at all that they can't use the toilets that they've already paid for in their rates. Look at it through the customer's lens. How would you feel if you were a customer, a tourist on your big OE, you've got a 20 to 30 minute stop in a picturesque tourist town next to a magnificent lake, but you spend the whole time trying to work out how to sort out your bladder. The reputational damage the pay toilets cause is concerning. Our tourists arriving at the lakefront should be spending their stop enjoying the view across the lake or shopping in our town and thinking, what a nice place. I should come back here one day. Instead of only remembering it's the place that made it difficult to go to the loo. So I won't go on and on, I'm going to skip a bit. Please take this opportunity to make a possible change. We've put up with this situation for far too long, 10 years for me, and I'm fed up with it. And we would ask if you do approve the removal of the $1 fee that the toilets be open at least 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. daily, maybe with some seasonal adjustments, and the showers be available via an electronic pay system as recommended throughout the day. And could the change please be done with haste before we go through yet another summer of spending way too much time thinking and talking about pay toilets?
I've got some reviews taken off Google. All of them rate the toilets 1 to 5. Here's some of their comments. I understand that it costs money to run a place, but to hire someone to collect $1 is a bit excessive. Tourists and visitors come to the town to spend money, and they have already made their financial contributions indirectly. Another comment, why would you make people pay to do a wee? Ridiculous. Locking the free toilets outside and forcing people to pay is ridiculous. Only accept exact cash. Another one, Donald. Pay per use toilet, disgusting and predatory. Luckily, we found a free public toilet just beyond the subway. Another one, stingy. We came to see the town, are happy to spend money on food, accommodation, activities. Then they want to sting us $1 for their toilets mean. And could I say, personally, I've just come back from the Rugby World Cup and touring around France and Belgium and Ireland, we did not pay there was no pay toilets. So, and it's changed since COVID actually. We have seen that where in Ireland there had been paid toilets, now it's free because, you know, they didn't want the contact and things like that. I think we're so far behind what's going on in other countries. Also, I'm a grandmother, I have grandchildren, so I frequent the park quite often, and they have a ruling that it's free for children under 10. So all our kids in Te Anau who are 10 and over are expected to pay for their toilets. I think that's really unreasonable because kids don't have any money on them, and when the kids are actually at the park when the toilets are open, so the free toilets are not available to them, only the paid toilets. And I just think that we as a community need to have this changed. Diane has, talked about from the tourist point of view, but actually, as a user, as a grandparent, as just a community member, I think we really desperately need these toilets to be free and open.
Thank you, Marilyn. And just before I open the floor to questions, just a couple of questions for myself. One of them for clarification, just around in the executive summary, it states that it's the only toilet in Te Anau that's able to cater for the number of people on a tourist bus. I believe there's a couple of other toilets.
Council toilets. The other two toilets are only two-pan toilets.
So the only council. And then just in terms of we've got a graph there which shows the income. We don't see the other side of that with the expenditure. And what sort of ties into that? And I guess that ties into my next question around the hours of operation, and does it need to be manned to be open? Like if we're not charging, can it be an unmanned facility?
So that would be addressed through the renewal of the contract. So we're trying to get this done prior to the renewal of the contract when the level of service would change at that point in time. The operational costs for 2023 were $157,172, of which almost $100,000 was for cleaning. So that's the big issue with this particular toilet, because it has to be manned to collect the money. Then your operational costs skyrocket.
Yes, is that the only reason why it's manned at the moment?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, I've got Councillor Keaston, Councillor Radical, and Councillor Menzies.
I'm just going to move the recommendation.
Cool.
I was going to do the same, but I'm mother and a grandmother who has used Lion Park many, many times, and I totally agree. It's time for that all to be lifted and make it a facility that tourists and the local community will
So you're rushing to move it. Councillor Duffy?
Well, I mean, initially when this was sort of put in place, I actually supported the concept of paid toilets because of the cost it was on our small number of ratepayers for, providing that service for tourism. Of course, times have changed and the practicalities that are raised are, extremely valid. I'm just wondering, from the government's levy and people coming into New Zealand now are charged at the airports, etc., is that a valid thing that we can lobby for some funding to come our way?
I don't sort of fund operational expenditure from my understanding of it. Tourism infrastructure.
No, it had no tourism infrastructure money about when this was done.
I mean tourism infrastructure. I mean, now there's a mechanism in place where all tourists coming into New Zealand pay a levy at the airports to support New Zealand's what we provide. So I'm just wondering, how do you tap into that, and is it a valid reason to be getting money or asking for? I mean,
they use for the tourism infrastructure funding, but I don't think that funds operational. But
it doesn't fund operational. It funds.
When it was set up, I don't believe that tourism infrastructure as a thing existed. It was to help supply or help provide for the costs around the country. And I mean, some of it goes to DOC, I'm pretty sure, and all the rest of it. But I just think it's a noise worth making.
Well, definitely, it's a valid point because of the number of tourists using the facilities and a common thing that we have across our district. So it definitely is a valid, what you say in your words, noise to make.
Yeah.
It's also what the tourists bring to the kind of field though, so you have to look at it in both venues.
If I may.
I'll just go Councillor Byers first. And then
Thank you, Your Worship. The showers, are they hot showers?
Yes.
And is that part of, heating those part of the cost here?
So they currently pay for a shower without a towel and without soap. They bring their own, or they can pay for a shower with a towel and soap. What happens at the moment, the cleaner goes in after every person comes in and cleans the showers because he's got nothing else to do. You go to a camping ground and your showers and you get cleaned twice a day. So by making it a swipe card entry, you remove that need for somebody to go in afterwards to clean them.
So does the cost of the shower cover the cost of the hot water?
Yes.
Councillor O'Brien?
Yeah, just a remark when you were talking about what is funded. So the Milford Opportunities Project was funded 3 million by that funding. I think it's $35 from this July for most foreign tourists, but they don't fund operations. So we've got a chunk of that in our area, 3 million.
Cool, so Councillor Keast has moved it, Councillor Runniclaw has seconded it. There's no further discussion on it. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Anyone against?
Can I note an abstention, please?
You certainly can. And I will declare that carried, and thank you to the community for your dedication.
That was an easy one.
Thank you very much. So,
Go no, these two.
And we're now moving. Thank you very much for coming out.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
For the rest of the meeting.
Got to drive back now. Good luck.
So we're now moving on to the item 7.7, which is on page 315 of your agenda, the Wallistown Cemetery replanting retrospective unbudgeted expenditure.
Right, so we get to move to the other end of the district. The purpose of this report is to request unbudgeted expenditure of up to $33,000 to cover the cost of to plant out the area at the Wallistown Cemetery where trees were removed and the ongoing weed and pest management for 3 years. This will be funded from the Wallistown Cemetery Bequeath Reserve. This was a project that wasn't in the long-term plan, it wasn't planned, and it wasn't budgeted for. However, as a result of removing the trees at the cemetery, the community met with Your Worship and our CEO, and a commitment was made to replant the area. The reason that it is retrospective, because it took quite some time to work with the community and the community board to come up with a planting plan that was acceptable to everybody, and we were running out of time to get it planted this planting season. So I'm happy to take any questions, if you have any.
Cool. Has anybody got any questions? Anybody has a straight on it? Councillor.
And ask the Wallistown Cemetery Bequeath Reserve, how did that come about?
A person in the community died and bequeathed money to the cemetery, to be used in the cemetery.
And so this fits within...
It fits within, I've checked with our property manager, and it fits within the purposes that money was put into that reserve.
Great. Thank you. No further discussion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Everybody against? Carried. Nice and quick. Moving right along. Thank you, mate. Okay, 7.8, community housing, Otautau and Edendale repairs unbudgeted expenditure. So here at the table, I see page 319. So I'll hand over to Saul Mark.
So through Your Worship, good afternoon everyone. Here for a decision on unbudgeted expenditure to repair the 2 community housing units. I will take this report as read, but we'll just summarise some main points briefly. So this is not a discussion on the future direction and decision making on community housing activity in its entirety and how it will be managed in the future. We would like a decision for immediate remedial repair on the 2 units only. So the first unit that we have is in Otautau. It is a Lockwood design, which makes repairs on it very difficult. Moisture has rotted out the timber behind the aluminium surface, and there is mould in the unit because of this. This unit has single glazing and the wooden windows that need repair. If we were to reclad the unit, the windows will need replacing, and the jambs will no longer work. And this would be double glazed to bring it up to healthy home standards. So the budget for the Otautau work is around approximately $75,000. The Edendale unit is a large mound that's formed in the kitchen. The vinyl was asbestos backed and needs to be removed by a specialist. If we do not know what has caused the mound to form, we suspect its moisture has warped chipboard flooring underneath it. Once this has been removed, we'll be in a better position to move forward and know what to do with it. This unit is an ex-Fonterra lab and was never designed to be a house. While this unit is empty, we're wanting to make it easier to heat and maintain, as it's in very bad need of a refurbishment because it is very dated and it's hard to heat in its current form. So the budget for this work is approximately $225,000. In both areas, there shows to be demand for these units, and we're seeking a decision from council to move forward and repair these units. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Are there any questions from the board?
Thank you. I was particularly wondering in relation to the Edinburgh unit, what other options there might be if we decide to replace that might be there, and have they been explored?
To replace what, sorry?
Rather than go through this process,
to replace the unit?
is there, a kit set or whatever that might be just going through all this design work and everything else?
I think in both cases there's the opportunity to replace with a better unit that was more fit for purpose. However, we haven't costed that out. If you were going to do it in a Otario, you have the ability to probably put 3 units on that section, which is an even bigger discussion. So I guess what we're saying here is we can bring these up to a good standard by doing this remedial work. The difficulty with the Edendale one is we don't know what we're dealing with until we lift the lino. And you're looking at $12,000 just to do that because you need specialists in to do that. We've already moved the existing tenants out of those 2 units into other units that were available, so they're not exposed to any further risk. But yes, that was a conversation that we did have. Is it economically viable to do the repairs or replace?
Yes, I for one would like to see that information.
So is there enough land in Otario to fit 3 houses?
You would fit 3 units on the piece of land at Otario.
Thank you, Worship. My question was around finding out why the it's obviously water that's getting in, or presumably it's water that's getting in. What is factored into here to find out why it's leaking and what we're going to do about it?
What unit are you talking about?
The Edendale unit.
That's why we have to lift the flooring to be able to do that, because it's a concrete slab floor with chipboard on top of it, and then the lino's on top of that. So we don't know where the water's coming from until we lift the flooring. We don't know what we're going to find.
It was never designed as a house. It's an ex-laboratory from Fonterra, so whatever they've had in the past.
How much work would be involved in, I'm just reflecting on Councillor Menzies' question and the fact that we fit more units on, and looking at, when we're looking at a significant amount of expenditure here, is it worth looking at other options first before we commit to any of this expenditure? And I guess, is there any cost or time frame around this if it gets held up with people needing to move back into those houses or anything, if there's a delay?
At the moment, the tenants are in other units in the current towns. It's just removing these houses from the portfolio, like the loss of income from not having them tenanted. And there are people on the waiting list in these areas, so it's really a decision for council where they sort of want it to go.
Was it council that bought it off Fonterra, or it was actually the dairy, I think before Fonterra, and converted it to living quarters? Or was it, I know there was 2 elderly couples lived there prior to the current tenancy. I had the idea they owned it themselves. Was that right or wrong?
I couldn't tell you that.
I think it
would be a question for...
So really, it's who converted it? Was it them or us? And the other point to just mention, I don't live very far from there, and in that September flood, our whole lawn was like 3 or 4 inches of water deep. I'd never seen that any other time, even though I've only been there 7 years. And I'm just wondering if that event might have been the same sort of thing there. The water just seemed to completely pond and have nowhere to go. In that same part of Edendale.
Yeah, it's the lino in the kitchen. It's the board underneath that's lifted. So
Yeah.
and it's lifted. It's quite significant. So when you stand on it, the oven and bits and pieces will lift like it's something's.
Yeah.
And then from first impressions, it looks like it's something that's leaked over time. Slowly got worse and worse.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know what level of water there was.
We're also planning to bring a discussion paper on what we do with community housing going forward. That's a paper in preparation at the moment, which will give you longer term options about where you want to go with this, and a range of issues around that. I guess my only comment on this one is that when these are done, they will be healthy home standard, they will be lovely, they will be good for 50 years, so that we're not building an asset that's going to be obsolete in 10. So there'd be little to be lost other than possibly the opportunity for more building at a tower if that's where council decides to go in terms of its involvement with community housing. So,
how far away was that report that you guys wrote?
We're still working our way through it, but it won't be immediate, that's for sure.
So I guess that's the Councillor Graney.
Your Worship, do we know what the capital value of these houses is currently, and what they would be or will be once improved?
I'd have to come back here with that information. Yep.
Because I think looking at I just did a bit of work on that 225,000 based on a 30-year mortgage. Like it's not, the rent's not going to cover the payback on that investment in that property in the medium term. So but I just wonder whether we need to fit this into the wider discussion, given the significance of the expenditure here, whether it does actually, whether it's worth potentially leaving this on the table until that report comes through, where we're looking at options. Like given that we can fit potentially 3 units on there, and if we did this work, we're going to prohibit ourselves from being able to have those. So, is that a shared view around the table? Lots of nodding.
We wouldn't be able to put other extra units on the Edendale site. It's sort of pretty much taken up there. So I'm just wondering if we should be treating them both the same.
Not I was going to look to the capital value, but what are the formats of the houses? Are they like 2-bedroom houses, 3-bedroom?
The Te Reo one's a single bedroom unit. The
it's 2 bedroom.
2 bedrooms.
Well, it's a bedroom and a very small bedroom.
It's got the Edendale one's got a couple in it. The Te Reo one had a single person in it.
I don't, Councillor Duffy, just to your point, I think is it worth looking at the cost of replacing that rather than fixing it, given that it was never designed as a house in the first place and actually getting something. So is there general consensus that I'll move from the chair that you leave it on the table then, Councillor Member, second to that? Councillor wants to say something.
I guess I'm a stickler for the resolutions today, but do we table this and make a resolution? Well, I guess we've got that report coming anyway, as far as the future direction.
Well, it might be worth making a resolution that report contains options for, or is that already going to contain, do we need to add that?
It wasn't specifically about these particular properties, but I think it will set a general you will get to set a general direction for where you want to go with community housing, who you want it for, how you want it to be funded, etc.
I think having options for replacing like a like for like with a new, well not necessarily like for like, just replacing it with new fit for purpose stock and what the cost of that would be, so we can tie that into this would be useful in that report.
On this report table, investigation of housing.
The way I see it, we're holding it on the table until that report comes through, and we're requesting that report contains options for replacing these houses with.
Through you, Worship, are you better off just voting on this and saying no, and then we come back with that information in the other report? Otherwise, we have to come back and talk to this.
Well, we may decide to actually, because one of those options of 75k, if the replacement option is 350 grand and we want to keep that house, we might actually still do that. So do we want to keep this on the table in case we want to go ahead?
So why on the table until the future of community housing and Southland district report?
mindful that we have been talking about having a discussion on the future of these buildings for probably at least 5 years.
It's definitely not another 5 years away.
That's what the paper is going to be, we're going to bring to you.
It's got Fiona just writing this back.
Council takes into consideration
Demolition costs.
Could have come and asked for a million dollars.
Okay, so I've moved that. Councillor Menzies has seconded that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody against? That is carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, 7.9, upgrade Thornbury Hall switchboard and replacement of the ovens. And we have Jared Catley. This is page 333. Welcome, Jared.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'll take the report as read, but I'll just highlight the purpose. The purpose of the report is to seek approval for unbudgeted expenditure of up to $6,000 to upgrade the Thornbury Hall switchboard and replacement of ovens. This is to be funded from the Thornbury Community Centre Reserve. The custodians of the hall have mentioned the ovens at the end of life. They're 66 years old. They weren't in the annual plan as per the switchboard, and fuse box keeps on tripping, and it was NES at times to come out to fix that. The board's recommended to council to approve that, so that's our recommended option today, to approve that, and it's unbudgeted infrastructure. Of course, that's what's at council today. Any questions?
Yeah, just a simple question for me, just around the process and I guess delegations. It almost feels like the council is an extra step in here for the size of the expenditure for the board. Did this actually need to come to council?
It does at this stage. It's unbudgeted infrastructure, but it is a question we asked as well on that. It is a low cost. But
yeah, because I think almost going forwards when we're looking at representation review and everything like this kind of thing, I think if the board's approving it and it's within the reserves of the hall, I think we're adding an extra step. Are there any other questions? Councillor Mendes?
I'm happy to move, given being present at that discussion. Unfortunately, the power stayed on, so we were able to see the light. And yeah, happy to move what seems to be a straightforward exercise, and that won't continue to be there.
Seconded by Councillor Fraser. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Anyone against? Nice and easy. Okay. We have item 7.10, which is the Stewart Island Energy Solutions Steering Group, working to the incoming minister or ministers and Southland MPs. And Simon is unfortunately unwell today, so we have Michael.
Hi, I don't think it's got anything to do with me.
Councillors will have read this. The steering group is largely what's chaired by community board chair from Stewart Island, and has council representation as well as other interested parties. The last government, or the very recent government, recognised that both Chatham's and Rakiura have real challenges with supply. 300,000 was allocated to the Rakiura project. Yes, there have been previous investigations into alternative energy on Rakiura. What was really important about this one, really got in touch with us to say that this was a possibility. Our very strong advice to them was this had to be run with local engagement. It couldn't be a project that was run from Wellington and not properly reference the involvement of the community. Unfortunately, in the potential transition to a new government, that 300,000 has been put on hold, and the steering group has recognised the importance of briefing for the incoming minister and the new local MPs, just outlining what the situation is for Rakiura and drawing attention to the urgent release of that funding. problem here. Obviously it says in here that the mayor and the chair would be signing it. And it obviously does spell out in the incredible challenges of
I'll move the.
Megan, seconded by Councillor Menzies. Is any discussion on that at all?
Well, just one point I'd just like to make, talking about the Southland members of Parliament. Are we talking about as well the Te Tai Tonga representative that covers the south, this area as well?
I think it'll go to anyone we can
But yeah, no,
get it
to.
Yeah.
All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody against? That is carried. Thank you very much. Okie dokie. So we're now on to our